Chapter 245, Go away. Go away. Go away. I don't want to see you anymore. Wah. Sitting there, little Phoenix looked like a human child. Its tears rolled down its cheeks like broken beads, which it kept wiping away with its wings. It was such a heartbreaking thing to see. Feng Wu felt a phantom headache. She wouldn't hesitate to help little Phoenix if it was asking for anything else. No danger would stop her from going out of her way to help it. But the problem now was that, you just won't help me. You like that little idiot better than me. Go away. Go away. I don't ever want to talk to you again. Hic. Little Phoenix gave a hiccup as it cried. Just then, there was a knock at the door outside. Feng Wu said. I have to go now. Little Phoenix went on crying. Feng Wu said, someone's looking for me outside and I have to leave you for now. Please don't cry. Little Phoenix was still crying. And it cried even louder. When Feng Wu returned to her physical form, her ears were still buzzing, as if her eardrums had been pierced. Sigh, what should she do with the moody little Phoenix? Was there no other way apart from kissing Jun Linyuan repeatedly? Feng Wu opened the door as she rubbed her forehead. Miss Chilling let out a sigh of relief when she saw Feng Wu come out. Xiao Wu, sob, the beautiful lady fought back her tears when she saw Feng Wu's face. My lady has been worried about you and she didn't sleep at all last night. Nor did the cub, Chilling explained. Seeing the cub's round head nodding as it dozed off, its eyes half closed, Feng Wu was most amused. The on its forehead was hilarious. Feng Wu flicked its forehead with her slender fingers. That really makes it look like a knockoff. Ha. Everyone laughed and it felt much more relaxed right away. Seeing the smiling faces, Granny Zhao laughed with the rest of them. She had always loved Miss Wu for her charisma that could cheer everyone up and settle their minds. Granny Zhao, I'm all sticky and sweaty. Seeing Granny Zhao, Feng Wu took her arm and gently swayed it back and forth. Granny Zhao poked Feng Wu in the forehead in the same way Feng Wu had done to the cub. Miss Wu, aren't you a little too old to do this? I'll always be a kid when you're around. Feng Wu raised her chin. Granny Zhao smiled wholeheartedly. No other mistress would hold their old maid's arm and talk to them that way. They were too proud to do that, unlike her Miss Wu, who gave them the feeling that she genuinely needed them. However, Granny Zhao still straightened her face and made an effort to tell Feng Wu off. Miss Wu, young ladies should always maintain a proper posture. You must walk gracefully, show no teeth when you smile, and when you speak. Gosh, Granny Zhao, holding Granny Zhao's arm, Feng Wu said, I'm really sweaty. Feel it yourself, how sticky my arms are. And if it gets windy? If it gets windy, you'll catch a cold easily. Oh, no. Chilling, get the bath ready. That successfully distracted Granny Zhao and she went to run Feng Wu a bath right away. Chapter 246, Awkward. Given her exquisite lifestyle, the beautiful lady set the standard equally high for Feng Wu. Everything had to be perfect, which meant that taking a bath was a very time-consuming process. Feng Sun had been standing outside the whole time. He hadn't wanted to intrude on the warm atmosphere in Feng Wu's family. Once Feng Wu started her bath, it was even more inappropriate for him to go in. Hence, he had no choice but to go on waiting. He waited until Feng Wu came out of her bath, all clean and refreshed. Feng Sun only knocked on the door when he heard Feng Wu's voice inside. Granny Zhao answered the door. Seeing that it was Feng Sun, she asked, Young Lord Feng, how may I help you? Feng Wu knew all along that Feng Sun was outside. However, she had been deliberately keeping her distance from Jun Linyuan and his people after what happened the day before. Hence, she kept Feng Sun waiting on purpose, hoping that he would leave on his own. Is Xiao Wu here? Feng Sun asked politely. Inside, Feng Wu rolled her eyes. Couldn't he just cut to the chase? She could only decide if she was at home or not after knowing why he was here. Feng Sun had made a great impression on Granny Zhao and she warmly invited Feng Sun in right away. Yes, she's here. Please come in. The bath cleansed Feng Wu of all the sweat and fatigue and she looked like a new person. Fair-skinned and with features as pretty as a picture, Feng Wu looked even more stunning with a little bit of makeup on. Granny Zhao wished she could show off Feng Wu to the entire world, instead of keeping her mistress shut away from everyone. Looking up, Feng Sun was also stunned by Feng Wu's beauty. Enjoying the view? Feng Wu waved a slender index finger in front of his face. Ah! Only then did Feng Sun return to himself. Well. Why are you here? Feng Wu frowned a little. She would never go see Jun Linyuan again after what happened yesterday. No, she wouldn't. What excuse should she give now? While Feng Wu was racking her brain, Feng Sun spoke. He got right to the point. Xiao Wu, my aunt woke up. Didn't you say yesterday that you were going to examine her today? Why didn't you go see her? Feng Wu looked baffled. Feng Sun was confused. Why are you giving me that look? You can't go check on my aunt now. Feng Wu was speechless. She had assumed all along that Feng Sun was going to take her to Jun Linyuan, but as it turned out, he was here for Mrs. Ning. She had racked her brain to come up with an excuse to turn him down. How awkward. Ahem, Feng Wu cleared her throat. It's about time. Let's go to Mrs. Ning now. She rose to her feet and left some instructions with Granny Zhao and Qiling before she left. Go and pack. We'll set out for the Imperial capital after I get back. Granny Zhao and Qiling thought it was rather hasty, but since they were used to following Feng Wu's orders, both nodded without any objections. On their way to Mrs. Ning, Feng Wu realized that Feng Sun's head was down, as if he was pondering something. She darted a look at him in bewilderment, but didn't ask him about it. They reached the Ning family's place in no time. Conflicted, Feng Sun waited a while before asking, Are you leaving for the Imperial capital already? Feng Wu nodded. Yup. Why the rush? Feng Sun puffed out his cheeks. Didn't you say that Boss Jun needs to rest in bed for 3 days? Why don't you wait until he recovers? We can leave together and we'll be able to look out for one another, right? Chapter 247, Leave for the Imperial capital together? Feng Wu said in her head, it was precisely because Jun Linyuan needed to stay in bed for the next 3 days that she had decided to leave early. That way, she could avoid traveling with him as well as a lot of awkward situations. At that thought, Feng Wu said a silent prayer for little Phoenix. Yan Yan happened to walk in at that moment and an idea struck her when she heard what Feng Sun said. Cousin, are you going to the Imperial capital? And you're leaving in 3 days? That's great. I'll go ask my mum so that we can leave together. Yan Yan was over the moon. The greatest opportunity had just fallen into her lap. She could take advantage of that favorable position and get closer to the crown prince. That weighed up the more she thought about it, the pinker her cheeks became. Feng Wu found Yan Yan incorrigible. She had made up her mind that she would do her best to avoid Feng Sun and the others. Otherwise, she would have so much more to worry about. She went in to examine Mrs. Ning without another word. Feng Sun turned to Yan Yan and stared unblinkingly at the teenage girl, who was immersed in her daydreams. Yan Yan, you. No. Before Feng Sun could figure out how to reject Yan Yan, Mrs. Yan said it for him. Both Feng Sun and Yan Yan turned to look at Mrs. Yan involuntarily. Mrs. Yan had hollow temples and protruding cheekbones, which gave her a grim and mean look to begin with. With the straight expression on her face, she looked all the more fierce. We're going back to Anyuan province and we're staying there for a while. We won't be going the same way as Feng Sun. Mothers knew their daughters the best. Mrs. Yan could see through Yan Yan with one glance and she was greatly upset at Yan Yan's manner of throwing herself at Jun Linyuan. It wasn't simply a matter of self-respect or not. More importantly, Mrs. Yan knew perfectly well that Jun Linyuan didn't have the least bit affection for Yan Yan. The girl wouldn't even be able to become a maid concubine if she tried. Yen would achieve nothing other than disappointing herself. Hence, before Yen fell too deep into this unrequited love, Mrs. Yen decided that she had to separate Yen from Jun Linyuan. Moreover, Mrs. Yen had always liked Ning Chenxi. Not only was the teenager Yan's cousin, the gentle Mrs. Ning would also make a great mother-in-law. Hence, Mrs. Yen had made up her mind to marry Yen into the Ning family. Yen comprehended none of her mother's care and thought for her. Glaring at Mrs. Yen, she said, "Mum, we've only just left Aunt's home. Why are we going back? You can go back on your own." "I'm not going. I'm going back to the Imperial capital with cousin Sun." Mrs. Yen smirked. "Don't you want to know who poisoned your aunt and avenge her? We'll go back to the Imperial capital together once we figure that out." After rejecting Yen, Mrs. Yen told Feng Sun, "Don't let her go back to the Imperial capital with you." Feng Sun was very easygoing in nature. He could talk to any superior figure as an equal, and he didn't mind mingling with people from all walks of life either, as long as he liked who he was talking to. He had none of the aloof manner characteristic of men from aristocratic families, nor did he exhibit any sense of superiority or feigned amiability. He was a man with zero consciousness of class. However, he found it simply impossible to like Yen, his naggy cousin. Luckily, Mrs. Yen gave him a way out before he could think of one himself. Feng Sun said earnestly right away, "Aunt, rest assured that Yen will be going with you. Plus, I'm going back to the Imperial capital with His Royal Highness. It's common knowledge that Boss Jun hates traveling with strangers, especially strange young women." Yen was utterly baffled. She looked like she had just been struck by a thunderbolt. Chapter 248, How Did It Go? Boss Jun hated traveling with strangers. Was Feng Wu not a stranger to Boss Jun? Was she not a strange young woman, above all else? Was Feng Wu not a young woman? Indignant and resentful, Yen was driven mad by her fury and jealousy. Just then, Feng Wu finished examining Mrs. Ning and came out, looking very composed. Feng Sun went up to her in a hurry. "How did it go? How's my aunt doing? Is she all right?" Feng Wu replied in a calm voice as she cleaned her hands with some honey locust seeds. "Most of the poison inside Mrs. Ning has been neutralized. What's left can just be treated with some herbal medicine." After that, she gestured with her eyes at the table, upon which lay a prescription she had just written. Mrs. Yen looked at Feng Wu, who was cleaning her hands, and the look in her piercing eyes turned indecipherable. She had had a very bad first impression on Feng Wu. After that, she found fault in everything the girl did and said the meanest things to the latter. Not only didn't the girl talk back, she also saved so many people. Compared with Feng Wu, Mrs. Yen found herself rather. She smiled bitterly inside, then turned to Feng Wu with a solemn look on her face. "Thank you very much, Miss Feng. After you get back to the Imperial capital, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to come to the Yen mansion. We'll do our best to help you." After that, Mrs. Yen handed Feng Wu a small wooden plate. It was the size of her palm, and carved on one side was an eagle which had a grim and piercing look in its eyes. Feng Sun's eyes lit up at the sight of it. He immediately took the plate and stuffed it in Feng Wu's hands. "This is great. Just take it." Yen was furious. Snatching the wooden plate out of Feng Wu's hand, she snapped, "Of course this is great. This is the Yen family's collecting card of the Chamber of Commerce. This card alone has an overdraft limit of 100,000 taels of silver. Even I don't have one. Why should you?" Mrs. Yen was so angry that she almost smacked Yen on the head. Was this girl merely stupid, or was she not concerned with her mother's health at all? Mrs. Yen had given Feng Wu that card to thank the latter for saving Mrs. Ning's life as well as to pay her in advance for her being saved later. Feng Wu had pointed out Mrs. Yan's health problems the first time they met, but back then, Mrs. Yen found Feng Wu despicable. Not only wouldn't she believe anything Feng Wu said, she had humiliated the girl for it. However, Feng Wu had proven her unparalleled medical skills over and over again after that, and as a result, Mrs. Yen had been dreaming every night of dying of some terminal disease. That was why her attitude toward Feng Wu had changed drastically. Mrs. Yen stared at Yen. The girl had been there the whole time. Did she not care about her mother at all? The more Mrs. Yen thought about it, the more bitterly disappointed she was. After they left the courtyard, Feng Sun looked at Feng Wu, swallowing back the words on the tip of his tongue. Feng Wu didn't press. She only waved at him with a smile. We'll be setting out today. See you in the Imperial capital. However, Feng Wu only took a few steps before Feng Sun called out behind her. Xiao Wu. Feng Wu turned around involuntarily. Feng Sun went on after some hesitation. Since you've finished examining my aunt, how about taking a look at Boss Jun now? Feng Sun thought that he had seen through Feng Wu. He had taken her for a two-faced girl who, despite her eagerness to get close to Boss Jun, wouldn't do it because of her pride. Feng Wu declined instinctively. She had known something like this was going to happen. Jun Linyuan was the last person on earth she wanted to get close to, and she waved her hands before she knew it. Your boss Jun is totally fine. His ability to recover is better than anyone's. 3 days in bed and he'll be as good as new. I don't need to see him. Chapter 249, Miss Wu is the best master. Seeing the look on Feng Wu's face, which reminded him of a frightened deer, Feng Sun was even more convinced of his conclusion. Smiling wryly inside, he tried to persuade Feng Wu. I think you should go have a look. You'll be able to set your mind at rest afterward, right? My mind is perfectly fine without it. Feng Wu raised her voice involuntarily. Look who was overreacting here. Feng Sun was even more sure that he had gotten to the truth of the matter. He smiled and kept his teasing gaze on Feng Wu, which gave her the creeps. What? Feng Wu asked. Are you really not going? Feng Sun asked. No. Feng Wu promptly left after that. However, when she got back to her place, she found Chilling suffering from diarrhea. Miss, I'm fine. It's just a tummy upset. Let's set out as planned. Chilling had some faint idea that Feng Wu was trying to stay away from the crown prince. Feng Wu felt her pulse and frowned. You're coming down with a bad cold and traveling won't do you any good. I'll make some medicine for you. Take it and go to bed. The medicine will induce perspiration and you'll be better tomorrow morning. We'll leave then. But, miss. Chilling was genuinely touched. No other master but Miss Wu would change their itinerary because of a sick maid. Her mistress treated all the servants as equals and interacted with them with enough patience and respect. So that's settled. Take the medicine and get a good night's sleep. Stop worrying about everything. You always have too much on your mind. Feng Wu patted Chilling's little head. Chilling had grown up as Feng Wu's maid and took on everything in Feng Wu's daily life, putting everything in order and allowing Feng Wu to focus on her studies in medicine refinement and formation without any distractions. To Feng Wu, Chilling had always been like a little sister. Once Chilling was in bed, Feng Wu and her mother went to sleep as well. Uncle Chiu and Granny Zhao, the elderly couple, were the last ones to go to bed. Granny Zhao sighed emotionally. When we left the Imperial capital back then, our old friends either worried about us or laughed at our choice, thinking that we had given up or were simply stupid for following the second branch of the Feng clan to Northern Border City. But if you ask me, these 5 years in Northern Border City have been the happiest time in my life. Uncle Chiu nodded. That's right. Plus, this branch is the family that truly treats us like human beings. The lady, Miss Wu, and the young master all respect us and value our service. Have you ever been scolded by any of them? No. Especially Miss Wu. With her mother's condition, she had to start taking care of the entire family at such a young age, but she never complained. She dotes on Our Lady, protects the young master, and cares for all of us. I sometimes feel for Miss Wu like she's my own child. Miss Wu really is the best master one can have. We're so blessed to be working for her. Granny Zhao gloated. You don't say. Now Miss Wu can cultivate again and she's progressing really fast. Those people in the Imperial capital will jump to their feet when they find out. Uncle Cho lowered his voice hastily. Miss Wu doesn't want other people to know about it yet and we have to keep it a secret. We haven't found out who did those things to Miss Wu back then, and if those people find out about this, we'll be in so much trouble. Chapter 250, Fall Asleep in No Time. Do you think I'm stupid? Of course I won't tell anyone. We'll only go public after Miss Wu has made great progress. Those people in the Imperial capital will be so mad. Hahaha. I can't wait to see their faces. While Uncle Cho and Granny Zhao were enjoying their conversation, Feng Wu was having difficulty falling asleep. She had been sleeping soundly when her foot tickled. Something seemed to be gnawing on her toes. Feng Wu woke up, lifted her duvet, and was dumbfounded at what she saw that the cub had climbed into her bed when she wasn't looking and was now lying by her feet. Holding her foot with its fluffy front paws, it was nibbling on it with its eyes closed. Feng Wu was speechless. The cub's teeth were still very tiny and its nibbles tickled rather than hurt. However, this act itself was too silly. Resigned, Feng Wu drew back her foot. However, the cub wouldn't let her. Still holding onto Feng Wu's foot with its paws, it stuck its tiny body to her sole and moved with it. Feng Wu picked up the little thing by the back of its neck, and only then did the cub open its eyes and look at Feng Wu innocently. It then held its stomach and cried piteously, its body shaking as if it was having a seizure. Feng Wu almost rolled her eyes. Are you really that hungry? The cub nodded immediately, looking very aggrieved. Its limpid big eyes were so cute that one felt like hugging it tight. Feng Wu sighed, why are you always hungry? You just ate. The beautiful lady shared a bed with Feng Wu and was woken up as well. She asked, what time is it? It's a little before dawn. Feng Wu checked the color of the sky. Mum, go back to sleep. It's not time for you to get up yet. You'll be muddle-headed the entire day if you don't sleep well. Alright, the beautiful lady lay back down and fell asleep in no time. Feng Wu shook her head in amusement at her mother's behavior. Judging by her mother's appearance and mannerisms, the lady had to be from a very prestigious background. Feng Wu had no idea what had caused that head injury, which caused her mother's intelligence to drop back to the level of a 5-year-old. However, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Her mother was able to live a carefree life this way and worry about nothing. Plus, she could always sleep like a baby. Other people said that her beautiful mother was useless as the head of the household and that she couldn't do anything to help Feng Wu and her brother, which was why Feng Wu had had such a difficult life. But that wasn't the case. Gently brushing away the loose hair from her mother's cheek, Feng Wu looked at her affectionately. Her delicate mother and younger brother and the warm family life they had given her was what motivated Feng Wu to become stronger, so that she could protect her family and every member in it. What was the point of becoming the most powerful person in the world if you had no family or friends? Was such a life worth living? Feng Wu didn't think so. After carefully tucking her mother in and making sure that the latter wouldn't kick off her duvet, Feng Wu quietly got out of bed and put on some clothes. It was 3 o'clock in the morning and all was dark outside. Leaving her warm bed was the last thing Feng Wu wanted to do. However, the cub was starving. What choice did she have? Chapter 251, I can't believe you've become like this. The cub had emptied the milk bottle and Feng Wu couldn't tell what was in the milk. She had no choice but to take the cub and its bottle to Feng Sun. Feng Sun lived with Jun Linyuan and Xuan Yi. Feng Wu found the place without difficulty. Since no one was guarding the door and the wall wasn't high either, Feng Wu stuffed the cub in her pocket, jumped swiftly onto the wall, and landed in the garden on the other side. The earthquake had destroyed most of the houses in Wanping town and most of the folks were living in tents at the moment. The most exquisite and magnificent house had been saved for the crown prince. Feng Wu was a little baffled as she looked around the spacious courtyard. Which one was Feng Sun living in? Since no one was around, she didn't know who to ask. Feng Wu wandered around, and just when she was going to push a random door open to ask the person inside, thump. Someone landed behind her when she reached for the door handle. Turning around, Feng Wu saw someone she knew in the silver moonlight. Feng Sun. Feng Wu cried out. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. You. Before Feng Wu could finish, she saw that Feng Sun was staring at her unblinkingly with an indescribable look on his face. His face turned various shades of color, making him look like a walking rainbow. You. Pointing at Feng Wu, Feng Sun stumbled back, the look in his eyes a mix of disbelief, astonishment, and terror. Terror? Feng Wu was bewildered. What was wrong with Feng Sun? All she did was come in here to get some food for her cub. It was starving. Feng Wu, you, Feng Sun swallowed, then said slowly, why you? I what? Feng Wu looked at Feng Sun in confusion. How can you do this? I can't believe you've become like this. I thought that at least you were different from the others and that you would value your reputation. You shouldn't be like every other girl. Why are you doing this? Feng Sun turned into a chatterbox as his imagination consumed him. Why are you doing this? I feel like I don't know you at all. Question marks were popping out of the top of Feng Wu's head as she stared at Feng Sun in confusion. Young Lord Feng, are you sleepwalking? Feng Sun glared at Feng Wu. Just because you're a good doctor doesn't mean that you can hypnotize me. You can't get away with this by doing that. Feng Wu was really pissed now. Feng Sun. You're not making any sense. You keep talking about me doing this thing, but what on earth have I done to freak you out like this? She really had no idea at all. It was so frustrating to be wronged like this. Feng Sun gave her a very strange, ineffable look. Are you not trying to climb into Boss Jun's bed? What? That successfully freaked Feng Wu out. Where on earth did Feng Sun get that idea and why did he even believe it? Feng Sun, what's inside your head? A brain or a sponge? Me climb into Jun Linyuan's bed? Are you blind or an idiot? You're... I can't believe this. Feng Wu yelled at the top of her lungs. She had always been a level-headed person, but after Feng Sun's repeated misunderstandings, she could no longer hold back her temper. Feng Sun looked at Feng Wu quietly, then looked behind her. Chapter 252, This Drama Cub is a Natural. Feng Wu looked back involuntarily. The window behind her had opened when she wasn't looking, and inside stood a tall, slender figure. Under the bright and clear moonlight, his face looked more stunning than ever. It was Jun Linyuan. Right now, Jun Linyuan's piercing, brooding and cold gaze was fixed on her. As soon as she saw Jun Linyuan, Feng Wu couldn't help but remember that kiss. She felt so awkward that she didn't know how to react, not to mention that the situation here was already very embarrassing. Feng Wu was speechless. Jun Linyuan had already been brainwashed by Feng Sun and believed that she was head over heels in love with him. Was she ever going to clear her name? However, Feng Wu wouldn't give up explaining herself. Taking the cub out of her pocket, she bravely met Jun Linyuan's gaze. My cub is hungry. It had cramps and broke into a cold sweat in the middle of the night. I had no choice but to come here. Jun Linyuan's eyes were two black whirlpools that had seething flames in them. His unblinking gaze still on her, he didn't utter a word. It was that inscrutable look again, and that ambiguous attitude, and his heavily guarded feelings. Do you believe me or not? Say something. This was so awkward. Feng Wu's heart raced under Jun Linyuan's intense gaze and she couldn't think of anything else to say. She was able to get through any situation calmly, but why was she so fidgety whenever Jun Linyuan turned his eyes on her? Feng Wu couldn't for the life of her figure it out. If no one intervened, Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan would probably be locked in this stare down until the end of the world without a word from either of them. The cub has cramps. Feng Sun rushed to her side, took the cub, and examined it. Well, it doesn't. It looks very healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. Feng Wu looked down at the cub in Feng Sun's hands. What? The half-dead cub that had been holding its belly and covered in cold sweat was brimming with energy now. It jumped out of Feng Sun's hands, stepped on his head, then hopped onto the window from there. Standing there, the cub met Jun Linyuan's gaze, and the guy frowned a little. The cub stumbled back involuntarily, a look of terror flickering in its bright eyes. This was such a terrifying teenager. The cub ran back in a whoosh and hid back inside Feng Wu's pocket before it looked out with an anxious expression in its big round eyes. Feng Wu poked the cub in the forehead. The little thing was such a cowardly bully. It had never shown that sort of fear with her. Ah, the cub rubbed its forehead where Feng Wu had poked it and tears welled up in its pretty eyes. It looked the most pitiful thing. Feng Wu was speechless. This drama cub was a natural. Feng Sun gave Feng Wu an indecipherable look. Can you at least try to find a better excuse? The cub doesn't know how to act. Feng Wu replied with a ha. The cub didn't know how to act. The little thing was an award-winning actor, okay? She had fallen victim to its acting several times already. Feng Wu wanted to cry but no tears would come. Would she ever be able to find justice for herself? Chapter 253 Jun Rex. Seeing that Feng Wu was on the verge of crying, Feng Sun said in a hurry, all right. I believe you. You're really here for the cub. It's hungry. That sounded so perfunctory that she would rather he say nothing at all. Feng Wu looked away and felt even more like crying. Jun Linyuan gave a wave of his long arm and the fist-sized luminous pearls in his room lit up. His voice was reserved and cold. Come in. Go in. Feng Wu felt so embarrassed and jittery at the sight of Jun Linyuan alone. The last thing she wanted to do now was to go into his room. While Feng Wu was dilly-dallying outside, Feng Sun went up to her, taking the cub in one hand and pushing her from behind with the other. Let's go. Jun Rex is having its milk inside and the cub can share its meal. I won't have to make an extra bowl this way. Feng Wu instinctively tried to stay away from Jun Linyuan, but she then realized that the cub would need feeding every day from now on and she couldn't come to Jun Linyuan every day. That way, it would only confirm the rumor that she wouldn't leave Jun Linyuan alone. Hence, Feng Wu nodded, then followed Feng Sun in. Jun Linyuan fixed his eagle-like eyes on her from a few steps away without saying anything, which made Feng Wu rather uneasy. She avoided Jun Linyuan's gaze involuntarily and her eyes began to dart around the room, which seemed to ease her embarrassment. The cub had a very sharp nose. It ran to a corner as soon as it set foot inside. In that corner was an exquisite and richly decorated basket, padded with soft cotton. The cub's big brother was lying inside. Compared with the lively, gambling cub, its brother was much more reserved. It had the look of a young king and the intact on its forehead gave it a very stately appearance. In front of it was a white porcelain bowl with some translucent liquid inside. Feng Wu couldn't tell what it was, but she could detect a high concentration of spiritual essence in it. The cub rushed over, buried its face in the bowl, and gulped down the liquid. Its brother's eyes widened a little and it looked displeased. Sticking out a front paw, it poked the cub in the forehead. Thud. Poor little cub. It rolled back. However, the little thing cared for nothing but its food. Quickly scrambling to its feet, it rushed over to the bowl again and took another gulp. Its brother frowned and poked it in the forehead again. Thud. The cub rolled back again. Despite the possible violence involved in this interaction, there was something quite affectionate about it. Seeing that the big brother was winning the fight, Feng Sun was elated. Look, our Jun Rex is such a natural ruler. It was only born yesterday and it knows how to fight already. Huh. That's awesome. Jun Rex. Feng Wu moved closer to Feng Sun and feigned an interested tone. Feng Wu deliberately ignored Jun Linyuan's gaze, as if all her attention was on Feng Sun and the cubs. Feng Sun knew little about what was going on in Feng Wu's head. Resting his hands on his waist, he guffawed. "That's right, our cub is called Jun Rex. Isn't that a great name?" Feng Wu was speechless. "Why do you look like that? Do you not like it?" Feng Sun looked at Feng Wu. Feng Wu gave him a look of distaste. "What kind of goofy name is that?" "Feng Sun, I bet it was your idea. Only a goofball like you could come up with such a name." Chapter 254, Hahaha. Staring at Feng Wu, Feng Sun gave her a sympathetic look. Feng Wu stared back at him. "What? You didn't name the cub?" "No." "So, it was Xuan Yi." "Wrong again." Feng Wu's heart raced. After ruling Feng Sun and Xuan Yi out, there was only one other person left. The intense eyes which were fixed on her were as piercing and relentless as that of a beast lurking in the dark, giving her the jitters. Feng Wu chuckled awkwardly and changed the subject. "By the way, what's that liquid you're feeding the cub? It smells like spiritual essence, but there's something more to it." Feng Sun was being very cheeky and he wouldn't let it drop. "You have to guess now. Guess who gave the cub that name and I'll tell you what that liquid is." He was setting her up right in front of her face. Feng Wu glared at Feng Sun. Feng Sun made a face at her, exactly like what a spoiled young master should look like. Feng Wu smacked her forehead. How could she have forgotten that the guy here was known for his unruliness in the Imperial capital? He was no lamb. However, Feng Wu wouldn't utter Jun Linyuan's name if she could help it. She went up to the cubs, crouched down, and studied them closely. "Back off!" Feng Sun cried out. "Jun Rex is very protective of its food. You're too close, and it'll think you're taking away its food. It'll throw its abnormal flame at you." Feng Wu had crouched down right next to Jun Rex. However, all Jun Rex did was to keep poking Feng Wu's cub, and showed no hostility toward Feng Wu at all. "What?" Feng Sun watched this in confusion. That wasn't right. Jun Rex was a very bossy and proud cub, and as the person who made that spiritual essence liquid for the cub, Feng Sun had had such a difficult time. When his fingers got a little too close to Jun Rex when it was eating, it almost burnt them with its abnormal flame. Bad cub. However, Feng Wu was much closer now and Jun Rex didn't seem to mind at all. That was so strange. Not only was Feng Wu very close, she was also reaching out to rub Jun Rex's fluffy and round, but very stately head. "Don't!" Feng Sun jumped to his feet. "Jun Rex is very sensitive that way and it'll bite you." However, to Feng Sun's disbelief, when Feng Wu caressed Jun Rex's head, the arrogant, cocky Lord Jun Rex didn't spit out any abnormal flame. Instead, it rubbed the top of its head against Feng Wu's palm and even licked it with its little pink tongue, looking very fond of Feng Wu. Feng Sun didn't know what to say. He jumped up. "Seriously? It's not biting you. And it's even licking your hand." Feng Wu looked at Feng Sun innocently. "How can you say such things about Jun Rex? It's such a lamb." Seeing Feng Wu's interaction with its brother, the younger cub was exasperated. It rushed to Feng Wu's side and snuggled into Feng Wu's arms, declaring its territory. Jun Rex reacted with a wave of its paw and the younger cub fell to the ground with a thud. It had to be really painful, just from the sound of it. However, the cub didn't seem to mind at all. Scrambling to its feet right away, it sat back in Feng Wu's arms and even moved Feng Wu's hand to its belly, showing that it was in Feng Wu's good graces. It then raised its chin at its big brother in a taunting manner. Feng Wu was speechless. This cub was so. "Ha!" Feng Sun burst out laughing. He then said to Feng Wu. Chapter 255, Goofy Jr. vs. Feng Tutu. "Your little cub is so funny. Look at it. It's puffing out its cheeks and looks so proud. I'm cracking up here. Your cub has the intelligence of a little boy. Feng Wu sighed in resignation. He didn't have to remind her of that. She wouldn't have been tricked repeatedly if the cub wasn't this smart. It might look cute and harmless with that round little face, but deep down, it was more quick-witted than a monkey. Hey, what's your cub called? Feng Sun asked with a smile. Feng Wu raised her head and saw that when she wasn't looking, Jun Linyuan had come up to them and was standing right behind Feng Sun. The luminous pearls shone on him, lighting up half of his face. The shadow gave more definition to his already chiseled features, making his face look even more sculpted. He looked remarkable. Now that he had moved closer, Feng Wu felt his gaze even more intensely, and it seemed to burn her skin. Feng Wu avoided his stare, acting as if he wasn't there. She turned to Feng Sun instead and said, "My cub's name?" "Well, since it's so goofy, and it's the younger one, I'm going to call it Goofy Jr." Feng Sun was sipping his tea and he spat everything out at those words. Luckily, Feng Wu had the cub in her arms. She raised it instinctively as a shield. Poor cub. The tea splashed all over its head. It looked utterly baffled. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Feng Sun laughed uncontrollably until he was shaking all over. Pressing his hands to his stomach, he said, "Ouch, my belly, ouch. Little Feng Wu, you really hate your cub, don't you?" Ha ha ha. What's wrong with that name? Feng Wu tilted her head. I think that's a pretty good name. Feng Wu's glance moved briefly from Feng Sun to Jun Linyuan and she saw the latter's lips curl a little. Jun Linyuan was smiling. Was that even possible? The merciless, mighty crown prince was actually capable of smiling? However, when Feng Wu looked again, she only saw his purse-thin lips and intimidating gaze. The smile was nowhere to be found. Had it been an illusion just then? The cub wasn't pleased with the name at all. Turning around in Feng Wu's arms so that it could face her, it stared at Feng Wu with its big black eyes and frowned. It then shook its head, then shook it again. No. The cub protested. Feng Wu poked it in the forehead. You really don't like that name? The cub was really able to comprehend her words and it shook its head repeatedly. Was she joking? It was going to be stuck with that name for the rest of its life. Of course it needed something more serious. Its master nodded. I guess Goofy Jr. is a little too silly. It sounds like you're getting told off. No, we can't use that name for you. Yes. The cub nodded earnestly, thinking that its master was going to change it to something catchy and respectable like Jun Rex. However, its master was obviously not going to follow that style. Glancing at the cub's forehead, she said casually, since you have a big one, too, basically means soil or earth in Chinese, and can also be used to describe something as unfashionable or countrified, on your forehead, we'll call you Feng Tutu. Xiao Tu will be your nickname, which sounds quite sweet and down to earth. I like it. Feng Sun roared with laughter as soon as Feng Wu announced the new name. Oh my god, holding his stomach, Feng Sun guffawed. Feng Tutu, ha 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 ha, Feng Tutu. Chapter 256, Feng Tutu. Feng. Tu. Ha ha ha. Feng Tutu. Feng Tutu. Feng Sun laughed till he cried. He trembled with laughter and spoke in disjointed syllables. Exactly how much do you hate your cub? What the heck is Feng Tutu? The cub's face had gone completely blank. It had expected something like Feng Sky or Feng River, if not something as memorable as Jun Rex. But the name it had been given was Feng Tutu. Feng. Tu. The cub burst into tears immediately. Grabbing Feng Wu's sleeve with its front paws, it pleaded with its glistening eyes. Although it was only days old, this clever cub knew perfectly well that if it was stuck with that name, it would be laughed at by all the other magical beasts. The cub had its future planned out, it was going to be the king of all magical beasts. However, there was nothing it could do to its master at that moment. She rubbed its head affectionately, but still wouldn't change her mind. Just then, shuffling footsteps came from outside, along with someone calling softly, "Xiao Wu, Xiao Wu." It was Feng Wu's beautiful mother. The sun hadn't risen yet. Why was she up? Feng Wu ran out into the courtyard right away and saw her mother feeling her way in the dark. The lady looked so frail that even the weight of her clothes seemed to be too heavy for her. The slightest wind could bring her to the ground and her teary eyes were filled with fear and anxiety. She looked like a child who had wandered off and couldn't find her way home. Seeing Feng Wu, the lady rushed to her side and held her hands tightly. Her eyes were brimming with tears and she pouted in grievance. "Xiao Wu, you're here." Sob. "I had a dream and I saw people beating you," sob. To Feng Wu, her mother was more like a little girl who needed protection and love. Hence, she wrapped her arms around her mother's slender shoulders and patted her gently on the back. There. I'm awesome. No one can beat me. Don't cry, Mum." That's right. The lady was at ease now that she had found Feng Wu, but she still wouldn't let go of Feng Wu's hands, as if she was afraid that her daughter would vanish at any moment. Feng Sun and Jun Linyuan watched this in bewilderment. Although they had seen the childlike lady when they were at the Feng Manor, they were still surprised to see the way Feng Wu interacted with her mother, which made them feel rather envious at the same time. Feng Wu was often impatient with them and gave them attitude. However, with her mother, she was nothing but gentle, caring, doting, and indulgent. One had to admit that her mother's beauty was indeed unmatched on this continent. Not only did she have perfect and exquisite features, her vulnerable, harmless, and innocent face was able to melt the toughest heart. Jun Linyuan's eyes flickered as he watched Feng Wu comforting her mother. He had no idea that family members could be this affectionate toward one another. Finally, Feng Wu was able to calm her mother down. She then said, "It's chilly out here and it'll be hours before the sun rises. I'm done here. Let's go back now." Chapter 257, What Does Little Tutu Eat? Just then, the cub jumped out of Feng Wu's arms, crawled into her mother's arms, and whined, waving its paws around. Still teary-eyed, the beautiful lady looked surprised. "Xiao Wu, are you going to call it Feng Tutu?" Feng Wu was bemused. "Mum, how did you know that?" She hadn't been there when the name was brought up. The lady looked at Feng Wu innocently and gestured at the cub. "It told me itself." Feng Wu was baffled. "Mum, you can understand what the cub is saying?" The cub made sounds and gestures the whole time, but it was only days old and spoke in a beast tongue that no one could understand. The lady blinked at Feng Wu. "Yes." "What did it say, then?" "It called Feng Tutu the worst name and it told me that you're a bad master. It doesn't want to talk to you anymore and it told me to spank you." The beautiful lady knew nothing about being tactful and told Feng Wu everything the cub said. The cub was dumbfounded. It looked like it had been struck by a thunderbolt. It didn't expect its master's mother to be this frank. Feng Wu was astonished as well, not at what the cub said, but by the fact that her mother could understand beast language. Feng Sun found this incredible. "Feng Wu, your mother can talk to beasts? Where did she learn that?" He had thought that the beautiful lady was capable of nothing but shedding tears, but she somehow had this hidden talent of understanding a beast language that no one else did. "Do you need to learn it?" The lady looked at Feng Sun in bewilderment. Feng Sun stood there dazed. Feng Wu burst out laughing. That was a great reply. Plain, to the point, and very effective. However, Feng Wu had an idea of her own. Judging by her mother's appearance and demeanor, she had to have an incredibly distinguished background. Something must have happened to her a long time ago. The lady thus lost her memories and became stranded in the Junwu Empire. Feng Wu decided that she would get to the bottom of it when she had the chance. Just then, Feng Wu sensed an intense gaze. She looked up involuntarily. It was Jun Linyuan. Feng Wu's heart lurched and she looked away involuntarily. However, she regretted it almost immediately. Why should she be the one to look away? Hence, she stared back at Jun Linyuan, refusing to show weakness. Intrigued, Jun Linyuan took her up on a stare-down and met her eyes with his unblinking own. In the dark, he reminded her of a magical beast lurking in the woods, giving off a dangerous air. Seeing the interaction between Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan, Feng Sun was greatly surprised. He couldn't believe his eyes. Finally, there was a woman bold enough to meet Boss Jun's gaze. After hanging around with Jun Linyuan for so many years, he had seen all kinds of bashful behavior when girls saw Boss Jun. Even Zhuo Qinghuan, the so-called goddess of the phoenix, would look away shyly under Boss Jun's gaze, blush, and play with a lock of hair by her cheek. How could Feng Wu be this brave? An idea popped into Feng Sun's head at that moment. If it wasn't for the fact that Feng Wu couldn't cultivate anymore, these two would have been perfect for each other. What a pity. What does little Tutu eat? The beautiful lady blurted out. Those words immediately saved everyone from the awkward situation. Chapter 258, with Jade Essence. So expensive. Feng Wu had been trying to pump that information out of Feng Sun, but the guy had been very evasive about it. However, under the beautiful lady's limpid eyes, Feng Sun couldn't bring himself to say no to her. He replied right away, the cubs need to feed on Jade Essence. The type of jade doesn't matter, but you have to make sure that it's top-grade jade, nephrite or vert empire jadeite will do. Each of those jade stones contains a streak of Jade Essence. Extract it, mix it with water or milk, and voila. Feng Wu was baffled by this piece of information. Jade Essence? And top-grade jade only? Feng Sun waved his hand. You don't need much. 1 drop per meal is enough. Feng Wu said, if my calculations are correct, 1 piece of nephrite will give you a few dozen drops of Jade Essence at most, right? Feng Sun nodded. Yup. Ever since the beautiful lady sold it out, the cub had been sighing to itself with a despairing look on its face. The contrast between its young face and that defeated look created quite an amusing effect, which had almost made Feng Wu laugh. However, she didn't feel like laughing anymore. The little guy here was a cash burner. Jade Essence? That was so expensive. The cub had its pitiful look back on as it eyed Feng Wu in grievance, fearing that she might decide to throw it away. Feng Wu sighed in resignation, for she really couldn't afford it. Yes, she was a grandmaster medicine refiner, but her master had left her with explicit instructions that the medicine she refined couldn't be used for profit. Moreover, she had never thought of running a business of her own during the past few years in the border city. As a result, she didn't have all that much money. Raising the cub on Jade Essence. The cost made her grimace just to think about it. Her mother said happily, Jade? I have a lot. Because the lady liked jewelry and gems, Feng Wu would collect them whenever she had the chance, especially jade stones, of which Feng Wu had amassed quite a big pile. However, if she were to feed the cub with them, the jade stones would become consumables, for once the Jade Essence was extracted, the stones would shatter. You're so costly to keep. Feng Wu poked the cub in its forehead. I'll keep you for now and toss you out when I can no longer afford you. Frightened, Feng Tutu scurried into the lady's arms and hid itself in her sleeve, from where it looked out with its teary big eyes. That melted the lady's heart. Glaring at Feng Wu, she rubbed the cub's head and placated it in a gentle voice. Little Tutu, don't worry. We won't give you up. Feng Wu was speechless. Rubbing her forehead, she checked the color of the sky and her exhausted mother, then shook her head. The sun is rising soon and I don't think you'll have time to go back to bed. Mom, you can take a nap in the carriage later. Feng Wu waved goodbye to Feng Sun as she said that, acting as if Jun Linyuan wasn't there at all. Jun Linyuan frowned and his intense gaze locked onto Feng Wu as she walked away. His brooding eyes looked like bottomless pools. Feng Sun turned to Feng Wu and asked, in the carriage? Are you leaving now? Feng Wu didn't look back. She only gave Feng Sun a wave as she walked away without hesitation. Feng Sun said with regret, too bad that little Feng Wu is leaving so soon, otherwise we could have traveled back to the Imperial capital together. Can't she wait 2 more days? I hope they'll have a safe trip. There are bandits in these mountains. We ran into some when we were here last time. Chapter 259, The Most Important Thing Now. As you wish, Jun Linyuan said quietly, then went back to his room. Feng Sun was indulging in his monologue when Jun Linyuan interjected, and he didn't quite catch the words at first. What? Boss Jun, what did you just say? Didn't you want to travel with them? Jun Linyuan's black eyes flickered. Of course. Feng Sun said without hesitation. I'm worried about little Feng Wu. Everyone in her team is crippled, weak, or sick. The only one able to fight is Uncle Chiu, but he was badly wounded. The bandits don't really need to do anything to rob them. One punch and that family is finished. How can I not worry? He then said hesitantly, but Boss Jun, shouldn't you stay in bed for 3 days? The look on Jun Linyuan's face remained impassive and stately as he said in an indifferent voice, don't tell me you bought it. But we're leaving in 15 minutes. Jun Linyuan gave the order in a nonchalant voice. Feng Sun looked genuinely moved and his eyes sparkled. Boss Jun, you're the best. Ah! He felt like hugging Boss Jun right now. Jun Linyuan threw a dirty look at him. Shouldn't you go get ready? Yes. Of course. Hahaha. I'll go tell little Feng Wu. She'll be thrilled. Feng Sun dashed off immediately. Feng Wu walked arm in arm with her mother, with Feng Tutu in the lady's arms, as they headed back to their place. Despite her impassive face, Feng Wu was all excited deep down. She pumped her fist inwardly. Finally, she was rid of Jun Linyuan and his buddies, and could cultivate freely on her way back to the Imperial capital. Finally. However, her excitement only lasted for a few minutes. Little Feng Wu. Hahaha, little Feng Wu. Feng Sun ran toward her like a happy butterfly. Feng Wu turned around involuntarily and her stomach lurched when she saw the big grin on Feng Sun's face. She had a very bad feeling about this. And she was right. Feng Sun was very excited as he said, ha ha ha. Xiao Wu, great news. We're leaving together with you. Ha ha ha, I'm going to keep you company again and you won't have to worry about bandits or raiders. Feng Wu was baffled. You're leaving with me. That's right. We'll set out together and keep each other company. I bet you're thrilled. Feng Wu was speechless. Thrilled my ass. She wanted to cry, but no tears would come. She had wanted nothing more than to steer clear of the crown prince to avoid arousing suspicion. Otherwise, the others would suspect her of things like sneaking into Jun Linyuan's bedroom again. But why did Jun Linyuan have to leave with her? What was the point of her rushing to leave? Seeing the baffled look on Feng Wu's face, Feng Sun grinned. Silly girl, I see you're overwhelmed by happiness. Well, off I go. I'll meet you outside the town gate in 15 minutes. He ran away as quickly as he had come after that. Feng Wu was speechless. How was she supposed to cultivate in secret this way? Feng Wu smacked her forehead in vexation. She had planned to raise her level to spiritual grandmaster on her way to the Imperial capital. After all, the situation in the Imperial capital was so complicated and forever changing. More influential people than one could count held themselves above the law. One wrong step and you could be facing imminent disaster. She would have to deal with the internal strife of the Feng clan as well as the covetous eyes of the Zhou family. To Feng Wu, the most important thing now was to cultivate, and cultivate, then level up, and level up. Chapter 260, Make Things Happen. Sure enough, when Feng Wu's carriage drove out of town, she saw Feng Sun and the other two waiting casually on horseback. Feng Sun waved at Feng Wu cheerfully when he spotted her. Over here, little Feng Wu. Over here. Feng Wu felt like banging her head against a wall. She needed her cultivation. However, she couldn't let her reluctance show. She had no choice but to give Feng Sun a nod before getting into her carriage. Mrs. Ning was still too weak to travel, so Mrs. Yen and Yen Yen would stay in Wanping Town and go back to Anyuan after Mrs. Ning got better. They would then deal with that Chu woman. Seeing Feng Wu's carriage following Jun Linyuan's horse, Yen Yen was sick with jealousy. She clenched her fists. That Feng Wu talked the whole time about not being in love with His Royal Highness, but as soon as His Royal Highness set out, she followed them like a fly. How could she be so shameless? The more Yen Yen thought about it, the more aggrieved and frustrated she became. She was Feng Sun's own cousin, and if any girl could take advantage of that position, it should be her. Why was Feng Wu taking the spotlight? She wouldn't allow it. Yen Yan's eyes lit up when she spotted a few wandering horses nearby. Feng Wu had no idea of the grudge which Yen Yan held against her. Right now, she was tucking her mother in. The frail beautiful lady had almost caught a cold from walking around on a damp, chilly night. She looked ghastly pale and Feng Wu was very concerned. The cub lay flat in the lady's arms, sound asleep and making no effort to hide its plump belly, which was quite an amusing sight. How wonderful, it was all peace and quiet. One of the reasons that Feng Wu tried her best to become stronger was that she wanted to be able to protect all those that she wanted to protect. She was hoping she could reach the spiritual grandmaster stage before they reached the Imperial capital. Feng Wu had been confident of reaching that goal, but that was before Feng Sun and the others showed up. Now, she wasn't that confident anymore. Wait, Uncle Cho. Feng Wu whispered something in Uncle Cho's ear. Uncle Cho then slowed the carriage down so that there was some distance between them and the Crown Prince's team. Only then did Feng Wu sigh with relief. Finally, she could cultivate again. If things wouldn't happen on their own, she would make them happen. Because for her now, time was of great importance. There was no time to waste. Feng Wu sat down with her legs crossed, closed her eyes, and switched to cultivation mode right away. And that was one of Feng Wu's remarkable talents. For many people, the hardest part of cultivation was entering the state of meditation. Once that state was achieved, one could move on with cultivating. However, many people got stuck at that first step, and it usually took them a very long time to eliminate distracting thoughts from their minds. But that was not the case with Feng Wu. With a peaceful mind that could concentrate very easily, Feng Wu could clear her head almost instantly, which alone was a great advantage compared with a lot of people. As soon as she entered the state of meditation, Feng Wu turned her sight inward to inspect her own body. She had just leveled up the other day, so there wasn't much golden liquid in her dantian at the moment, it was a tenth full at most. She was a level 7 spiritual master now. If she wanted to reach the next level in a short period of time, she would have to fill her dantian with the golden liquid first before attempting to break through. Feng Wu sensed the rippling motion of the golden liquid in her dantian. She took a deep breath. Fire spiritual energy gradually gathered around Feng Wu. It twisted and turned in the air like little fairies. Chapter 261, Feng Tutu is a treasure. The fire spiritual energy seeped into Feng Wu's body either through surface capillaries, her nostrils, or however it entered her body, it wound up in her dantian in the end. Above the golden liquid in her dantian hovered the original force of the dantian, which rippled like water. Hence, the fire spiritual energy and original force clashed in her dantian. Water and fire were naturally incompatible, and each side tried to suppress the other. An intense conflict ensued. Boom! The fire and water collided, creating one drop of golden liquid after another. The golden liquid then dripped down. Plop! It was like filling a bucket with a tap that was barely turned on. Feng Wu could distinctly sense how the level of the golden liquid in her dantian gradually rose with each drop of golden liquid. When it reached the top, she could try to break through. Feng Wu closed her eyes and waited patiently. This accumulation process was lengthy and arduous. Many people would be stuck at the same level for years. Feng Wu's rate of progress was already like riding a rocket. If anyone else knew about this, they would find it unbelievable. Feng Wu's dantian filled by 20%, 30%, 40%. Even she herself didn't expect the liquid to accumulate this fast. However, she soon began to frown. She was running out of fire spiritual energy. It seemed that she would have to stop here. Feng Wu sighed. She would have to find a way to get some spirit stones for her cultivation. It would slow her down, but it was better than nothing. Just as Feng Wu was about to open her eyes, a streak of dense spiritual energy drifted out from between her arms. It was purer and denser than anything she had sensed before. It was much better than what she had absorbed from the air. Between her arms? There was no time to think about it. Wherever that spiritual energy had come from, the most important thing now was to absorb it and store it in her dantian. That spiritual energy was so much easier to refine. It was such a treasure. Feng Wu opened her eyes an hour later. Her dantian was 60% full. How is it so fast? Even Feng Wu found it unbelievable. She looked down at her arms. The last 1/5 of spiritual energy had come from here. Feng Tutu had snuggled up in her arms with its belly facing up. Its fluffy head was slanting to one side and it was sound asleep. Feng Wu rubbed the little head with a smile. The little thing spent its days eating, sleeping, and playing cute. Feng Wu was confident that it would turn into an expert in trickery one day. She wondered what sort of spiritual pet she would end up with after costing her so much valuable jade essence. Feng Wu sensed something unusual when her fingers touched the cub's head. She picked it up with both hands right away. The little guy looked exhausted. It didn't wake up when Feng Wu held it up. Feng Wu sensed that pure, dense spiritual energy that had yet to dissipate. Could it be? Was it? Seriously? Feng Wu brought the cub closer, and she could indeed faintly sense that spiritual energy. Her eyes widened. Chapter 262, Jackpot. The little guy could supply her with spiritual energy. And the spiritual energy it offered was purer, denser, and more pristine. The palm-sized little cub could offer her so much spiritual energy. Just imagine what it could do when it got bigger. She had hit a giant jackpot. The more she thought about it, the more excited Feng Wu became. She held the cub up and kissed it hard on its head. Feng Tutu puckered up its little face, but went on sleeping. Feng Wu chortled. With this endless supply of spiritual energy from Feng Tutu, her cultivation would be so much more efficient. Just then, a familiar voice came from outside. Little Feng Wu, why are you giggling in there? You sound like a little mouse. It was Feng Sun. Fearing that the guy might wake up her mother, Feng Wu picked up Feng Tutu and quietly got out of the carriage. It was getting dark outside and they were ready to make camp. Since Uncle Chiu and the others had taken care of setting up the tents, Feng Wu had nothing to do other than carry the cub around. Feng Sun moved closer and looked baffled when he saw the sleeping cub. Why is it so sleepy? Here, let me hold it. He reached out to Feng Wu. But Feng Wu refused, shaking her head. No, thanks. You don't know how to hold it properly. Feng Sun darted a suspicious look at Feng Wu. She had been attentive to the cub before, but right now, she looked as if she was holding a fragile china doll. However, Feng Sun didn't think much of it. He told Feng Wu, we're on the edge of a jungle. Up ahead is a dense forest, and it won't be safe for your family there after dark. So, we're making camp here tonight. Feng Wu nodded. That was quite thoughtful. Boss Jun is cultivating, Xuan Yi went hunting, and I'll go chop some firewood. Your people are either too weak or too wounded for those jobs, so just sit while we get things ready. Feng Sun waved at Feng Wu and left after that. Turning around, Feng Wu saw that her mother was still sleeping and Uncle Chiu and the others were busy getting their own tent ready. She then put the cub into the tent before carrying her mother out of the carriage to put her in the tent as well, where she could sleep more comfortably. After tucking her mother in, she quietly walked out of the tent. She had sweated a lot when she was cultivating just then, which was the most unbearable sensation for Feng Wu. Hence, she decided to find somewhere to clean herself properly. After listening carefully, Feng Wu heard the sound of water in the northeast. She couldn't sit still at that sound, so she went to tell Uncle Chiu about it. Uncle Chiu said, "Don't worry, Miss Wu. We'll keep your mother very safe. Plus, young Lord Feng and the others are not far off. We can turn to His Royal Highness for help, if no one else is available. Go do what you have to do." To Feng Wu, Feng Sun wasn't the most reliable guy to turn to for help, but Jun Linyuan was a different story. With the guy around, no magical beast would dare set foot within a 10 kilometers radius. Feng Wu nodded. "All right. I'll be back soon." Since she had her change of clothes in her ring, Feng Wu took nothing else with her as she headed northeast. The water sounded close, but in Feng Wu's estimation, it could be as far as 5 kilometers away. A beautiful lake then came into view. The pale blue water was clear and still. Thick mist hung over the surface, giving it an ethereal feel. Chapter 263, Peeping Tom. Grotesque stones protruded out of the clear water here and there, creating a deserted yet graceful image. High rocks rose around the lake, forming a natural barrier that could provide one with a sense of security. All was quiet. There were no cries of insects or birds, let alone any sign of human beings. Feng Wu smiled a little, then began to undress. She took off her drenched robe and put it on a rock nearby, then moved on to taking off her embroidered cape, skirt, hairbands, socks, and shoes. Until the only clothing left on her slim body were her pale pink undergarments. However, Feng Wu had overlooked one thing. She wasn't the only one in the lake at the moment. Behind another rock was a teenager named Jun Linyuan. Because of Jun Linyuan's injury, Feng Sun had forbidden him from washing himself, which was something Jun Linyuan as a neat freak couldn't bear. After leaving his carriage, Jun Linyuan found the lake right away. He had gotten used to cultivating in the water lately. He had heard scuffling noises after he had just finished the first part of his cultivation. A grim look flickered in the crown prince's deep-set eyes. How dare this person intrude on his cultivation? Before he could react, the crown prince saw something that almost gave him a nosebleed. A teenage girl was taking off her clothes, facing his direction. Soon, he saw her slender body and every bit of her fair skin. She had long, straight legs, a tiny waist, and small, firm breasts. She stood gracefully in the water with flesh of ice and bones of jade. Her beauty could obscure the moon and make flowers blush. Jun Linyuan's eyes widened when he saw her face. It was Feng Wu. Why was she here? Despite his usual calmness, the crown prince had gone completely stiff and was at a loss over what to do. His mouth fell open at this unexpected scene. But it didn't end there. Feng Wu still found what was left on her too much. Pulling loose the string of her undergarment, she took off the top part and tossed it into the lake. Jun Linyuan was astonished. Instinctively, he looked away. Something seemed to have burst into flame in his chest. Closing his eyes, he stepped back, then back again. He only let out a breath of relief after he was behind that big rock again. However, he couldn't get that image of Feng Wu ripping the undergarment off of her body out of his head. The temperature in his cheeks was rising. His earlobes had turned light pink. Feng Wu had no idea that a Peeping Tom was close at hand. Wearing nothing but her underpants, she stood on top of a high rock, then somersaulted and dove into the water, as effortless as a fish. Thud! There was a faint plop and a tiny splash of water, which were almost undetectable. Feng Wu enjoyed herself greatly, swimming around in the lake. Scooping up some water with both hands, she let it shower down on her fair skin. Under the silver moonlight, she glistened, and the water on her skin reminded one of twinkling stars. Jun Linyuan's face had turned pink. He knew that he couldn't stay here any longer, or, He had no idea what he would do. Just then, faint footsteps came from somewhere nearby. Brother, Wanping Town wasn't destroyed? Are you sure about that? That was a familiar voice to Feng Wu. Feng Lu? Why was she here? Feng Wu then heard Feng Yuan's voice as well. Chapter 264, Jun Linyuan. Blood rushed to Jun Linyuan's head. His ears turned scarlet red as he mumbled "See no evil" repeatedly to himself. He then realized something incredible. He had always had zero interest in naked women. However, he was having a hard time turning away from the girl's body now. What was happening to him? Brother, Wanping Town wasn't destroyed? Are you sure about that? That was a familiar voice to Feng Wu. Feng Lu? Why was she here? Feng Wu frowned and a displeased look flickered in her bright eyes. Feng Yuan and Feng Lu disappeared during the siege of Wanping Town, and Feng Wu figured out right away that the cowardly duo must have fled. Now that the crisis of Wanping Town had ended, those two people had decided to come back. Feng Wu had no intention of meeting the brother and sister like this. Frowning, she stored her clothes in her ring with a wave of her hand. After that, she dove into the water, propelled herself forward with a stroke of her long legs, and was behind that big rock in no time. Feng Wu decided to stay in the water until Feng Yuan and Feng Lu left. However, as soon as Feng Wu was behind that big rock, she froze on the spot. Her eyes opened so wide that her eyeballs were going to fall out. Jun Linyuan. Jun Linyuan. Jun Linyuan. Feng Wu felt like she had been struck by the biggest thunderbolt and her head went completely blank. Jun Linyuan leaned over just as Feng Wu was about to scream. Before Feng Wu knew it, his lips were on hers. It happened so fast that Feng Wu's surprised cry was silenced completely. Feng Wu didn't know that her head could become even more blank, but apparently, it just had. She heard Feng Lu and Feng Yuan talking nearby. Feng Lu said, "Brother, I say we go back to Wanping Town." Feng Yuan frowned. "It's not that simple. How are you going to explain our absence in the last few days after we go back? But intel says that His Royal Highness and his entourage are right there in Wanping Town. Brother, aren't you trying to get friendly with His Royal Highness? Are you going to miss out on such a wonderful opportunity?" Feng Yuan said, "But, brother, we both know that once His Royal Highness is back in the Imperial capital, it'll be virtually impossible for you to meet him again. You're halfway to your goal already. Are you really going to give up on it now?" Feng Yuan replied, "But what are we going to say if His Royal Highness asks where we were when Wanping Town was experiencing a crisis?" Of course Feng Yuan wanted to go back. He knew perfectly well that once they were back in the rigidly stratified Imperial capital, His Royal Highness would be beyond his reach. Even the most ignorant person might have a good idea every now and then, and that was the case with Feng Lu at the moment. Clenching her fists, she said, "We'll tell them that something came up and we were trapped in Death Valley." "That's right. Brother, we'll say that Feng Wu set us up and tried to get us killed there. But we managed to escape." Was Feng Yuan unable to come up with an idea like that? Of course not. However, he would make sure that he was never the person who drew the plan or designed the trap. All he ever did was give hints to others and use them as pawns, while maintaining a harmless and friendly image himself. Chapter 265, The Abnormal Flame is Growing. Are you sure about that? Feng Yuan frowned. Why not? Feng Lu smirked. Do you think Feng Wu will say anything nice about us when she gets back home? She'll trash us in front of grandmother. The best defense is offense. She made us do it. While Feng Yuan and Feng Lu were discussing how to throw mud at Feng Wu, they had no idea that the person they were plotting against had heard everything they were saying a short distance away behind a rock. Feng Wu flared up at those words and she tried to jump out of the water. However, Jun Linyuan's strong left arm had wrapped around her waist, his right hand was pressing hard on the back of her head, and he wouldn't stop kissing her. His smell filled her nostrils. Both hands pressing against Jun Linyuan's chest, Feng Wu struggled to push him away. However, she might as well try to lift a mountain. She was as petty as an ant compared with Jun Linyuan. To make matters worse, little Phoenix was feeling thrilled in the ring. It flew around in circles and chattered in excitement. Ah, the little abnormal flame is growing. It's getting bigger. The bird had no idea what was going on outside. All it knew was that the tiny flame suddenly grew a little bigger, which was such exciting news. Feng Wu wanted to cry but no tears would come. When Feng Lu and Feng Yiran finally left, Feng Wu thought that Jun Linyuan would let go of her now. But another voice rang out almost immediately. Why, standing by the lake and looking at the flat surface of the water, Feng Sun was bewildered. He asked Xuan Yi, didn't Boss Jun say that he was coming here to cultivate? Why isn't he here? Xuan Yi was equally confused. Is he behind that rock? Feng Wu's eyes snapped open at those words. Her bright eyes glistened like clear pools. Jun Linyuan opened his eyes at the same time. He stared at Feng Wu unblinkingly with a fierce look in those brooding eyes. His eyes seemed to spit fire that could burn her to ashes. It was as if streaks of lightning were emanating from his pupils. Wherever he looked, Feng Wu felt her skin tickle at his gaze. She was heating up. Feng Wu could barely breathe under his intense gaze. Her mind went blank for a moment and her heart beat so fast that it almost jumped out of her mouth. However, Feng Sun's voice rang out when their gazes were still locked and the guy was coming toward this rock with Xuan Yi. Feng Wu was exasperated. Feng Sun, out of all people. The guy had already decided that she was throwing herself at Jun Linyuan. If he saw this, she would never be able to clear her name again. Seeing that Jun Linyuan was going to step out from behind the rock. Terrified, Feng Wu exerted all her strength, yanked Jun Linyuan downward, and dragged him to the bottom of the lake with her. Caught off guard, Jun Linyuan sank into the lake with Feng Wu. Feng Sun and Xuan Yi stood on the narrow lip of the rock and looked around. Both were disappointed when they saw nothing but the quiet water. Reluctant to give up, Feng Sun shouted, "Boss Jun! Boss Jun!" He got no reply. Disappointed, Feng Sun said, "Boss Jun really isn't here, then. He wouldn't hide from us." Xuan Yi said nothing. At the bottom of the lake, Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan eyed each other in embarrassment. Chapter 266, The View Under the Water. Water rippled between them and colorful fish swam around them like butterflies. The view was spectacular. However, Feng Wu wasn't in the mood to savor the view. All she wanted to know was when Feng Sun and Xuan Yi would leave. She could dive, but she was no fish. She couldn't hold her breath forever. Feng Sun wasn't that far from where Feng Wu was. She could see him just by raising her head. She prayed for Feng Sun to leave soon, but whoever was up there obviously didn't hear Feng Wu's prayer. Not only didn't Feng Sun turn to leave, he invited Xuan Yi to sit down with him and struck up a conversation. The mist only covers half of the lake and the other half is glistening. It's like the perfect balance of yin and yang. Feng Sun sat down comfortably with his legs dangling over the edge of the rock. Feng Wu was exasperated. She was screaming in her head, "Leave! Get lost, right now!" Feng Sun was as frivolous as he always was, but she could count on Xuan Yi, couldn't she? However, Xuan Yi seemed to have been influenced by Feng Sun and sat down with him. The only difference was that he crossed his legs properly, instead of letting them dangle. "Xiao Xian, what do you think of Feng Wu?" Feng Sun asked casually, rubbing his chin. Xuan Yi had yet to reply, but Feng Wu almost cried out underwater, "Stop thinking. The girl you're talking about is suffocating down here." Xuan Yi was as serious and stiff as always. "What do you mean? How does she look?" "Beautiful. And her personality? Great. Her manners? Impeccable. So tell me, if she's that perfect, why doesn't Boss Jun like her?" Feng Sun was utterly puzzled. Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan stared at each other. Jun Linyuan wanted to say something, but stopped himself after some thought. Feng Wu's gaze was so piercing that he lowered his eyes involuntarily. Before he knew it, he was looking at her fair bosom and he went stiff instantly. Blood rushed into his cheeks. Following his gaze, Feng Wu looked down and saw her own bare chest. She blushed right away and her mind went blank. Oh God, that she had been half-naked this whole time. Without thinking, Feng Wu shoved Jun Linyuan away, swam backwards, and pulled a robe out of her ring at the same time. She then wrapped it around herself. Jun Linyuan turned the other way. Although he wasn't looking at her now, he had too retentive a memory to forget anything. The image of her wonderful body had been inscribed into it. Why was this happening? He had seen naked teenage girls before. Maids in the Imperial Palace had been trying to get in bed with him all the time after he turned old enough. But they only disgusted him. After stabbing a few of those to death with his sword, no one dared to try it again. He had always thought that naked women repulsed him. However, he couldn't stop thinking about Feng Wu's body now. He had to admit that he was attracted to her. At the bottom of the lake, Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan remained in that awkward deadlock, one enraged and the other bewildered. Feng Sun and Xuan Yi were still talking. Xuan Yi didn't sound convinced. Boss Jun doesn't like Feng Sun. Why do I feel that something has changed in him? He really doesn't like her. You know what? I asked Boss Jun about it once. I asked him if he liked Feng Wu or not. Do you know what he said? Chapter 267, Angry Young Lion. What did he say? Boss Jun said, "Are you blind?" Xuan Yi rubbed his chin in confusion. Boss Jun said that himself. Yes, every word of it. Feng Sun replied decisively. Feng Wu stared at Jun Linyuan coldly, her sharp gaze almost piercing Jun Linyuan like a dagger. Blind? One had to be blind to like her. Was she that unworthy? Anger filled Feng Wu's chest and she bit her lower lip so hard that it almost bled. She was fine with not liking Jun Linyuan, but as a proud girl, what Jun Linyuan said was humiliating. The crown prince straightened his back. He was a nobleman and he would take responsibility for what he said. However, when Feng Wu swam up to him and glared at him with her glistening eyes, Jun Linyuan somehow felt diffident and couldn't help but look away. Fury gave Feng Wu a lot more courage than she usually had. Despite her usual reverence for Jun Linyuan, Feng Wu grabbed his arms and glowered at him. Jun Linyuan kept evading her gaze and clenched his fists. Feng Sun was now on his blacklist. However, poor Feng Sun had no idea of all this. The guy went on telling his story. But Feng Wu has no idea how much Boss Jun dislikes her. She cares about Boss Jun so much and she's so in love with him. How can I bring myself to tell her what Boss Jun said? I can only drop a hint here and there, and tell her to give up. But that girl is quite stubborn. Feng Wu. What the heck? Since when was she in love with Jun Linyuan? And since when was she stubborn? Nothing like that ever happened, young Lord Feng. Jun Linyuan's eyes stopped darting around and his gaze shifted back to Feng Wu. There was now a teasing look in his eyes, along with the arrogance of someone in a superior position. Feng Wu. Did Jun Linyuan believe that as well? Was that why he was doing this? Feng Wu had always been sharp-tongued and aggressive. She couldn't bear to be taunted by Jun Linyuan to her face. Instantly, she charged forward like a cheetah and tried to headbutt Jun Linyuan. Why was Feng Wu doing something so reckless? She didn't know the reason herself. All she knew was that she was very angry and that she couldn't talk underwater. Those driven mad by humiliation had no rationality to speak about. Feng Wu charged at Jun Linyuan like a young lion. She spared no effort. Jun Linyuan dodged instinctively and Feng Wu dashed past him. She was going to run into that big rock, which Feng Sun and Xuan Yi were sitting on, head on. Even if bumping into it wouldn't make much sound, Feng Wu's head would crack open at the impact. Jun Linyuan looked anxious. Grabbing Feng Wu's left leg with his right arm, he yanked hastily. Bang! Feng Wu's head knocked into Jun Linyuan's chest with a faint thud. Jun Linyuan grunted. After summoning the storm on the mountain outside Wanping town, Jun Linyuan had exhausted his spiritual essence. His defense ability was as frail as glass at the moment, and the impact almost fractured his ribs. Wait, did you hear that? Xuan Yi frowned. Chapter 268, Lovebirds. Feng Sun was enjoying telling his story and he rolled his eyes at Xuan Yi. Hear what? Are you even listening to me? But I really heard something in the water just then, Xuan Yi said suspiciously. You heard something in the water? Big surprise, Feng Sun snapped. There are fish, shrimps, crabs, all kinds of things live in the lake and they must make some noise at some point. What's that look on your face? Do you think that some lovebirds are doing it down there? Of course not. We've been here for quite a while. Anyone down there would have drowned by now. Xuan Yi waved his hand hastily. Feng Sun nodded. Right, that's exactly what I mean. Lovebirds, lovebirds, lovebirds. Feng Wu was already furious, and hearing Feng Sun's words, her face went scarlet red and she felt like fainting. She had only been trying to take a bath here. How had things ended up like this? Was she drawn to disaster or what? Feng Wu really wanted to cry now and she was going to vent all her rage on Jun Linyuan. Anger filled Jun Linyuan's black eyes when he heard Feng Sun and Xuan Yi's conversation. His muscles tensed up and he went as stiff as a piece of iron. Feng Sun, you're so dead. Jun Linyuan's train of thought was interrupted by Feng Wu, who had bitten down on his chest like an angry young lion. It's all your fault. All your fault. None of this would have happened if it wasn't for you. Feng Wu bit down with all her strength. Jun Linyuan grunted. It was really painful. Jun Linyuan didn't have a rule of not hitting women. If it was anyone else doing this to him, they would have long been beaten to a pulp by now. However, this girl. Jun Linyuan found that he couldn't bring himself to do it. Looking down at the top of Feng Wu's head, he was lost in thought. Feng Sun and Xuan Yi had no idea what was going on at the bottom of the lake. The two guys were still chatting away. I don't understand. Xiao Wu is so perfect. Why won't Boss Jun like her? Sigh, poor girl. Xuan Yi said nothing. Feng Sun then asked, Xuan II, would you like Xiao Wu if you were him? Xuan Yi coughed into his right hand. Feng Sun didn't notice how uneasy Xuan Yi looked. Looking up at the sky, Feng Sun buried himself in his reverie. Xuan II, do you think I should have a go with little Feng Wu? Cough, cough. Still biting Jun Linyuan's chest, Feng Wu choked on water and she coughed until she almost passed out. Damn that Feng Sun. Was he forcing her to come out? Stop calling Feng Sun harmless. That guy was such a schemer. However, there was no way Feng Wu was going to show herself now, let alone show up with Jun Linyuan. If they went up to the surface together, they would become the lovebirds Feng Sun had just talked about. Feng Wu wished she could pass out right now. Staring at Feng Wu, Jun Linyuan's hands reached out and he tried to drag Feng Wu out of the water. No, no, no way. She would rather die from coughing than from embarrassment. However, Jun Linyuan wasn't going to let that happen. Grabbing her by her collar, he pulled her upward. Luckily, she had been coughing underwater, or Feng Sun would have heard it right away. The lake was very clear. It was all thanks to a big indent under the rock that Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan were hidden and weren't spotted right away. Chapter 269, You're Way Out of Line. Jun Linyuan almost succeeded in dragging Feng Wu out. No! At that critical moment. Wrapping her arms around Jun Linyuan's neck and clamping her legs around his lean waist, Feng Wu bent down and pressed her lips to his. Instantly. Jun Linyuan's head went blank. Their first kiss had been no more than a peck. The second one was to keep her from making any sounds. This was the third time. Feng Wu was running out of air from all the coughing, and she forced Jun Linyuan's mouth open, robbing him of the limited amount of oxygen he could offer. Jun Linyuan went completely stiff, which was very unlike his usual aloof and graceful self. He could clearly feel the legs clamped around his waist. And it felt as if his heart was going to jump out of his mouth. Why did Feng Wu have such an effect on him? Jun Linyuan wouldn't have been so sure if it had been a one-time thing. However, every time it happened after that, he reacted more strongly, which was proof enough that Feng Wu was somehow different. However, Jun Linyuan was overwhelmed by an emotion that he couldn't explain himself. They had no idea when Feng Sun and Xuan Yi left. Feng Wu only knew that she was lifted out of the water before she passed out from the lack of oxygen. Cough, cough. Feng Wu coughed so hard that she thought her lungs were going to fall out of her mouth, but she still mustered all her strength and punched Jun Linyuan in the chest. Why did you pull me out? Why? This is so humiliating. Keeping his emotionless gaze on Feng Wu, Jun Linyuan said in an arrogant and contemptuous tone, "They're long gone." After that, he spun around and sat down on the rock. Exhausted, Feng Wu still managed to climb onto the rock with much difficulty. She then lay down and gasped for air. She was bewildered. Had she been imagining things when they were underwater? Down there, Jun Linyuan might have seemed arrogant, but there had been something in his eyes that could almost be called gentle. She had even thought that. But now, he was back to that unapproachable and callous manner, and once more was the crown prince that was too superior for anyone to even talk to. The air he gave off was intimidating. Staring at Feng Wu, Jun Linyuan recalled how stunned he had been a moment ago. How could he react so strongly to Feng Wu? As a cultivator whose sole purpose in life was to reach the pinnacle of martial arts, that was unacceptable. Jun Linyuan's intense gaze on Feng Wu gradually cooled down until it was void of all emotion. Feng Wu. Jun Linyuan's brooding gaze felt bone-chillingly cold. You're very attractive, but you're also way out of line. What? Glaring at Jun Linyuan, Feng Wu didn't understand what he meant. I won't stop you from falling in love with me, but please restrain yourself and don't interfere in my life. Jun Linyuan said in a serious tone. But, I've seen you without your clothes, after all. I'll make an exception and take responsibility, said the crown prince proudly. Feng Wu was speechless. Instead of replying to him with words, Feng Wu slapped Jun Linyuan hard in his face. Smack! The crown prince had been hit before, but never in the face. After the crisp sound, a swollen red mark in the shape of a hand appeared on Jun Linyuan's cheek. Feng Wu had used all her strength in that strike. She was beyond furious. Jun Linyuan. Rising to her feet, Feng Wu looked down and pointed her right index finger at the crown prince. You've gone too far. Chapter 270, Jun Linyuan the Unreasonable. Do you think you own this world or something? You think all women are just lining up to fall in love with you, don't you? I wasn't in love with you before, I'm not now, and I won't ever be. Jun Linyuan stood dazed on the spot, too shocked to give a response. He had been slapped. He had been slapped in the face. Moreover, he had said he was willing to take responsibility for what had happened, so why was this girl still roaring like a little lion? Shouldn't she be giggling and all shy now? The sages were so right, women and children were unfathomable. The crown prince was angry as well. Just think about it. Casting a stern look at Feng Wu, Jun Linyuan turned to leave. Think? Think my ass. Feng Wu yelled furiously. Darkness had fallen. The mountain trails were tortuous and were even more so after sunset. Feng Wu dashed into the mountains, still pissed, and soon ran into a few silver horn boars. The boars were starving and were elated to find a human girl on her own. They charged at her, roaring. For silver horn boars running at full speed was quite a terrifying scene. Feng Wu urgently needed to vent her anger at the moment. The hell with "I won't stop you from falling in love with me." The hell with "restrain yourself." The hell with "don't interfere in my life." And the hell with "take responsibility." Hahaha. Of all the people Feng Wu had ever met, he was the biggest narcissist of all. How irritating was that? Feng Wu struck out at lightning speed. She didn't use a sword, for it wouldn't be cathartic enough. Feng Wu just used her fists. Rumble. She struck out, one punch after another. Her small fists seemed to have endless strength in them. Each punch landed in an ice socket. Rumble. Crumble. There were 4 boars to begin with, but more were attracted by the noise, and in the end, over 100 boars showed up. On a normal day, Feng Wu wouldn't have bothered to hang around and would have promptly retreated. This was because these silver horn boars were anything but weak. She couldn't guarantee that she would be able to safely get away from so many of them. However, driven by rage, Feng Wu could no longer think straight. Rumble. The only thing she could think of now was to attack, attack, attack. She saw Jun Linyuan's face in every boar. She was killing a boar with each punch, which felt rather satisfying. More boars kept coming and there were hundreds of them now. However, people were intimidated by unreasonably violent people, and so were boars. Feng Wu's ferocious strikes were an utterly shocking sight for these silver horn boars. They could take Feng Wu out by charging at her all at once, but they were already terrified by Feng Wu's frantic attack without care for her own safety. They turned to flee, scattering like scared birds. And they spread the news among themselves. Crazy woman back there. Be aware of the crazy woman. So scary. Run. Feng Wu had no idea what kind of impact she had made on the boars, and she carried out the bloody massacre with bloodshot eyes. When that red mist in front of her eyes finally disappeared and she was able to calm down. Everywhere she turned, she saw dead silver horn boars. Their bodies were scattered all over the mountain. And every single one of them had been killed with just one strike in the head. Their brains were all over the ground. Their eyes were wide open. They looked miserable. Once she was back to normal, Feng Wu looked at this in disbelief. She looked from her hands to the dead boars. A few boars had yet to leave. Their eyes met Feng Wu's and instantly. Chapter 271, Long Way to Go. They wailed and couldn't run away quickly enough. It was as if they had wings on their feet. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Feng Wu was speechless. She rubbed her pretty nose. Was she that frightening? All of a sudden, she felt a hot sensation in her abdomen, which was where her dantian was. Could it be? Feng Wu found this pleasant surprise incredible. She found a secluded corner, where she closed her eyes, entered the state of meditation, and looked inwardly at her dantian. OMG! Feng Wu was shocked herself. She clearly remembered that her level 7 dantian had only been 60% filled earlier today when she was in the carriage, and a third of it was Feng Tutu's contribution. But now the golden liquid in her dantian was spilling out. She was ready to advance to the next level. Actually, she had more than enough golden liquid to make herself a level 8 spiritual master. What was going on? What happened? All she did was kill a few hundred silver horn boars. What Feng Wu didn't know was that when she massacred the boars, she had entered an extreme mental state that most cultivators would never experience in their lifetimes. This state was only accessible when one reached the extremes of an emotion. It could be joy, rage, sorrow, or happiness. Only when one reached the threshold would they have a chance of entering this state. Once they did, they would enjoy great benefits. There was no time to think. Feng Wu closed her eyes and began to cultivate. Guiding the overflowing golden liquid, Feng Wu turned it into a tiny golden dragon and let it travel through her meridians. The dragon split into 2 at her heart. One streak traveled all the way up until it reached the divine blood of the phoenix situated between her eyebrows. The other streak traveled down, from the Byuk acupoint to the Guanmen and then Tai. After reaching Sanyinjiao, it turned up at the calves and headed for that divine blood of the phoenix between her eyebrows. The divine blood of the phoenix and Datian cooperated with each other. The dragon emerged from her dantian and ended its journey at the divine blood. Once the journey was completed and the golden liquid was absorbed by her body. Feng Wu heard the fluctuation of spiritual essence inside her. She had reached level 8. She was a level 8 spiritual master now. Feng Wu was elated. She never expected to be able to level up again after having reached level 7 just that morning. Even when she had still been known as the genius girl, she had never made such fast progress. After activating the divine blood of the phoenix her master had given her and resuming her cultivation, Feng Wu had started from scratch and made her way up to a level 8 spiritual master in under a month. Such speed was unmatched in the whole of the Junwu Empire. Feng Wu took a deep breath. Blessings and curses did come in pairs. Quarreling with Jun Linyuan had helped her with her cultivation progress, so it hadn't been completely awful after all. However, blue veins popped on Feng Wu's forehead again as soon as she recalled what he had said. Jun Linyuan. Humph. Ignoring the dead boars, Feng Wu rose to her feet and headed back to the campsite. Little Feng Wu. Feng Sun pranced toward her as soon as Feng Wu set foot in the camp. Chapter 272. Bad Xuan Yi. Feng Wu spotted Feng Sun right away. Feng Sun's face reminded her of what happened under the lake, which then made her think of Jun Linyuan and what he said. Feng Wu, you're way out of line. I won't stop you from falling in love with me, but please restrain yourself and don't interfere in my life. After finally being able to calm down, Feng Wu was immediately agitated again. She knew that it wouldn't be fair to lash out at Feng Sun, so she gave him an indifferent glance and walked past him. Feng Sun had never seen Feng Wu this way. The coldness in her eyes almost froze him and he forgot how to respond. Little Feng Wu. Frowning, Feng Sun grabbed Feng Wu's wrist. Feng Wu only turned around and gave him an emotionless nod. Let go. What's wrong? Why do I smell blood on your clothes? Are you hurt? Feng Sun asked anxiously. There's this very clear lake nearby and it's all misty and beautiful. Come, I'll take you there so that you can clean yourself. Something snapped in Feng Wu's head as soon as Feng Sun mentioned that lake. That won't be necessary. Feng Wu threw off Feng Sun's hands with all her strength and stormed off. Even the back of Feng Wu's head seemed to spit out flames of anger, which bewildered Feng Sun greatly. Did you piss her off? Xuan Yi walked out from behind a tree, holding a sword between his crossed arms. The solemn-faced teenager was actually very into gossip. Feng Sun looked very innocent. I didn't. Xuan Yi wouldn't believe him. Why else would she be so angry? Feng Wu is the most reasonable girl. Feng Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It really wasn't me. Did you confess your love to her, then? Feng Sun had been nagging Xuan Yi the entire afternoon over whether or not he should court Feng Wu. I wish I had, Feng Sun smiled wryly. She snapped before I could say anything, and I got scared. Xuan Yi rubbed his nose. Maybe she guessed what you were going to say and that tantrum was only to stop you from saying it. Feng Sun was a little crestfallen. Is that so? Xuan Yi nodded earnestly. Of course. Feng Wu didn't want to embarrass you by rejecting you, so she dropped the hint before you could say it aloud. Feng Sun gritted his teeth. Are you sure about that? Xuan Yi nodded affirmatively, then said in a serious tone, you tell me, then. Why was she so angry? Has she ever treated you this way? Feng Sun looked like he was going to cry. She doesn't like me at all. Xuan Yi said, yes. The hard blow rendered Feng Sun speechless. Feng Wu heard the quarreling voices inside her own tent before she entered. Feng Lu smirked. Ling, I'm your superior and you're only a servant. You're going to do as you're told this instant. We're taking this tent. Crossing his hands behind him, Feng remained silent. Ling was shaking with anger as she shielded Granny Zhao and the lady behind her. Staring at Feng Lu, who had a smirk on her face, Ling said, Miss Lu, young Lord Feng gave us this tent and we set it up ourselves. We also prepared all these sleeping bags and brought them all the way here from northern border city. Your request to take them all is just impossible. Impossible? A servant must do as the master asks. You're a slave of the Feng clan and in no position to say no. How dare you? Feng Lu lashed Ling with her whip. Chapter 273, How Can You Defeat Me? Ling was only a level 1 spiritual master who specialized in skills related to daily tasks. Feng Lu's whip was aimed at her fair cheek. It left a long, bloody mark on Ling's smooth face right away. Ah! The beautiful lady cried out in fear and cringed. Granny Zhao pulled the lady into her arms and consoled her. There, don't be scared. Xiao Wu? Where's Xiao Wu? Sob. Feng Wu was the lady's ultimate emotional anchor and the person she could always turn to. Whenever something happened, Feng Wu was the first person that came to the lady's mind. Feng Wu saw Feng Lu lash Ling with her whip again as soon as she entered the tent. Feng Lu was bellowing, How dare you disrespect me? I'll sell you to a whorehouse and you'll wish you were dead. Try to talk back to your customers there. The whip was about to land on Ling's face again. Rage filled Feng Wu's eyes. No one saw how she did it, but the next second, she grabbed the silver tip of the whip. The whip consisted of 9 sections, all of which were barbed. The spikes grew denser from the handle to the tip. Hearing the noise, Feng Sun was going to run to Feng Wu's aid. Jun Linyuan smirked. Get back here. Turning around, Feng Sun said anxiously, Boss Jun, they're picking on Feng Wu over there. She asked me to protect her family for her. I have to go to her. The look in Jun Linyuan's eyes was ineffable under the dim moonlight and his voice was cold. Come with me. Feng Wu had to ask for help if she needed it, and Jun Linyuan would be waiting. He would break her pride and make her see the world as it really was. Feng Sun was exasperated. But at that moment there came a loud bang. A figure flew out of Feng Wu's tent and smashed into an old tree nearby, so hard that it snapped the tree in half. Feng Lu stared at Feng Wu in disbelief, so shocked that she forgot to fight back. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Why, can you defeat me? You're a cripple. Cough, blood kept trickling down from the corner of Feng Lu's mouth. Feng Wu hadn't used any spiritual essence when she struck out, so Feng Lu still assumed she was a cripple. But how could this girl defeat a level 6 spiritual master with physical strength alone? Feng Wu held the silver whip in her hand. The densely packed barbs shone coldly under the moonlight. Smack! No one expected Feng Wu to whip Feng Lu, but she just did. The sound reverberated in the silent night. One would normally avoid hitting their opponent in the face when fighting, but the face was exactly where Feng Wu aimed. Blood splashed out from Feng Lu's fair cheek after one whip. Ah! Hurt, scared, and furious, Feng Lu cried out. Feng Wu! Feng Yiran could no longer stand by and watch. He reached for Feng Wu at lightning speed. However, as soon as he touched Feng Wu's wrist, Feng Yiran went completely stiff as an excruciating pain ran from his fingertips all the way to his head. Feng Yiran was rendered immobile instantly. Feng Wu! You! Staring at Feng Wu in disbelief, Feng Yiran realized that he had lost control over half of his body. Feng Yiran was no novice. As the heir-to-be of the Feng clan, he had reached the spiritual grandmaster stage after consuming a considerable amount of his clan's resources. Chapter 274, The Wrath of Feng Wu. But he was unable to take Feng Wu down. What happened was that he had felt a burning sensation on his fingertips as soon as he touched Feng Wu's wrist. It was obvious that she had put some potent poison there. Looking at Feng Wu's wrist, Feng Yiran saw that it had swollen up and was quite a dreadful sight. However, it didn't seem to affect Feng Wu's movements at all, and the silver-white whip whooshed through the air. Smack! Another merciless strike landed on Feng Wu's cheek. That first one was on your left cheek, and this time I chose the right. Now it's well balanced. Feng Wu snorted. But do you think I'll cut you loose just like that after what you did to Qiuling? In your dreams. After that. Feng Wu rolled up her sleeves and lashed Feng Lu relentlessly with the silver whip. Crack! 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 The crisp sound of the whip resonated in the air. Feng Wu spared no effort in her strikes. She didn't use any of her spiritual essence, for it wasn't time for her to show that card yet. Hence, she was only using physical strength. A level 8 spiritual master might not be strong enough physically, but Feng Wu's body had been enhanced by the divine blood of the phoenix and her strength was incredible. Feng Lu shrieked in pain at each lash and tears rolled down her cheeks as she howled. Feng Sun and Jun Linyuan exchanged looks. Feng Sun had been about to rush to Feng Wu's aid, but saw that he didn't need to, for Feng Wu had gained the upper hand. The proud crown prince, on the other hand, was waiting for Feng Wu to beg for his help, so naturally he wasn't going to step in. However, neither of them had expected Feng Wu to easily overpower Feng Lu, who was a level 6 spiritual master. She had even given Feng Yiran, a spiritual grandmaster, a hard time. Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Wu's swollen right wrist with an indecipherable look in his eyes. One couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but it certainly contained a degree of anger. Feng Lu rolled around on the ground in pain as she wailed and cried. Feng Yiran glared at Feng Wu. Stop! Stop it! However, he only yelled, but didn't try to stop Feng Wu physically. For he couldn't feel one side of his body. Looking down, he saw that one of his arms had turned a grayish-blue in color, which was terrifying to watch. Feng Wu only stopped after 20 lashes, and by then, Feng Lu had almost passed out. She threw the whip onto Feng Lu's face with a smirk. Next time I catch you bullying my family, I'll beat you 10 times for every finger you lay on them. Mark my words. The silver whip hit Feng Lu on her nose and blood oozed out from her nostrils right away, which looked rather terrifying. Frightened, Feng Lu forgot to cry. Everyone else was also shocked by Feng Wu's deeds and none of them spoke for a long time. Uncle Qiu and Granny Zhao exchanged looks of pleasant surprise. Their proud, unrestrained Miss Wu was back. That was great. Tears of excitement welled up in their eyes. With Miss Wu getting her ability back, the second branch of the Feng clan, would no longer have to fear anyone in the clan. Feng Sun was equally stunned. He had always thought of Feng Wu as this frail, helpless girl, but as it turned out, she was ruthless when she wanted to be. The whipping even creeped him out and he said a silent prayer for Feng Lu. Xiao Wu, sob, the beautiful lady took Feng Wu's hand and gave it a tug. Feng Wu's expression, which had been as intimidating as a fiend's a moment ago, softened right away, and she gave her mother a warm smile. Mum, don't be afraid. I'm here for you. Yes. The lady trusted Feng Wu completely and relied on the latter like a fragile vine on a tree. Chapter 275, He's Still Doing It. Little Feng Wu, that was incredible. Feng Sun patted Feng Wu's hand. I thought you'd be hopeless without spiritual essence. I didn't expect you to be able to scare Feng Yiran off. Good for you. Feng Wu gave him a nonchalant nod, then turned to walk her mother back into the tent. All of a sudden, she sensed a pair of baleful eyes staring at her. Who's there? Stop hiding. Picking up a stone, Feng Wu hurled it at a corner. Thud. The stone hit something, which cried out in pain. A crisp voice cried out in that shady corner. Ouch, Feng Wu, that hurts. Who the hell do you think you are? How dare you do that to me? Looking at Yan Yan, who had walked out of that corner, Feng Wu narrowed her eyes. Don't flatter yourself. You're not worth my attention. Cousin. Cousin. You saw what she did. You saw it, right? Yan Yan ran toward Feng Sun, still crying. Feng Sun found Yan Yan the ultimate pain in the neck. He frowned at her. Aren't you supposed to be going back to Anyuan City with my aunt? Why are you here? Does your mother know you're here? Of course Mrs. Yan knew nothing about this, or she would have broken Yan Yan's legs herself. Yan Yan turned evasive. Cousin, I want to go back to the Imperial capital. I miss my father and my younger brother. Just take me with you, sob. Feng Sun was speechless. Missing her father and brother? Like hell he was going to believe that. She had shamelessly followed them here only because of Boss Jun. He scowled at her. We only have enough provisions for ourselves, and you're not included. Where are you supposed to sleep tonight? I'll let you stay here tonight, but you're going back to Anyuan first thing tomorrow morning. I'll have that one. Covering her bloody forehead, Yan Yan cried and yelled, I'll sleep in that tent and Feng Lu can stay with me. She's hurt. She can't stay in the open. Let me share a tent with her. Feng Sun snapped, no, you can't. That's Feng Wu's tent. Feng Wu had beaten Feng Lu up because the latter had tried to take her tent. I want that one. Cousin, please. Didn't you bring all the tents yourselves? Just let me have that one, won't you? No. Feng Sun turned her down outright. Feng Sun had every reason to believe that if Yan Yan dared to take the tent by force, Feng Wu wouldn't think twice before beating her to a pulp. Little Wu was in a very foul mood at the moment. He was terrified of Feng Wu now. But he wouldn't ask Feng Wu for the tent even if he wasn't afraid of her. To him, Feng Wu was much more adorable than his stupid cousin. Without thinking, Yan Yan summoned up her courage and ran up to Jun Linyuan. Biting her lower lip, she whined, Your Royal Highness. Could you please have Feng Wu give us her tent? You can see how badly wounded Feng Lu is. I feel so sorry for her. Wasn't the Crown Prince supposed to abhor Feng Wu? Given the choice, he would definitely give the tent to her instead of Feng Wu, right? Feng Wu stared at Jun Linyuan coldly with eyes that could spit fire. She had her own tent stashed away in the ring, it was just that she hadn't had a chance to take it out yet. Standing there, Jun Linyuan darted an arrogant look at Feng Wu. Why was this woman so stubborn? Would it kill her to beg him for help? Feng Wu stared at Jun Linyuan and Jun Linyuan stared back at her. Chapter 276, I Don't Want It. Their eyes met and it felt as if streaks of lightning were crackling in the air, sending sparks flying. The two of them looked like they were ready to cut each other's throats. Everyone else watched in consternation. Where exactly did all these grudges come from? Jun Linyuan frowned. She just wouldn't beg him, would she? He had never been disrespected before in his life, and it felt so humiliating. The look on Feng Wu's face was equally grim. She could still hear Jun Linyuan's words in her head. Feng Wu, you're way out of line. I won't stop you from falling in love with me, but please restrain yourself and don't interfere in my life. Feng Wu took a deep breath. Her cheeks burned and the humiliated feeling was coming back. She felt so offended. It was so frustrating. And humiliating. Jun Linyuan was still waiting arrogantly for Feng Wu to beg. He was offering her a way out and all he needed were the right words. However, Feng Wu smirked. If Miss Yen likes this tent so much, she can have it. That successfully surprised everyone. That wasn't what they had expected. Shouldn't Feng Wu be asking for the Crown Prince's help as well? Feng Sun was baffled and said right away, no. Feng Wu, what are you thinking? Where will your family go in the middle of the night if you give the only tent left to that lot? That lot? She was that lot to her cousin, while Feng Wu was his own lot. Glaring at Feng Sun, Yan Yan wanted to bite the man on his arm. Feng Sun couldn't care less about Yan Yan's injury. Staring at Feng Wu, he said loudly, "No. I won't allow it." Jun Linyuan was equally shocked by Feng Wu's unexpected move. A grim look flickered in his brooding eyes. Feng Wu smirked. "Why not? I don't want it and that's that. Where are you going to stay tonight, then? You can stand the rough weather, but what about your mother? She's so fragile." Feng Sun snapped. Holding Feng Wu's hand, the lady glowered at Feng Sun. She didn't utter a word, but the look on her face said enough. She would go wherever Feng Wu went. Taking her mother's slender hand, Feng Wu smiled. "We're leaving now and we'll travel through the night." She then turned around and gave Uncle Cho a look. Feng Wu's family might not be the most competent when it came to fighting, but they were the most united lot. Uncle Cho nodded immediately. "Miss Wu, everything is ready. We can leave at any moment." Feng Wu nodded. "We're leaving now." Feng Wu helped her mother into the carriage without saying another word to the others. Jun Linyuan stood there dazed. His cold gaze seemed to bore into Feng Wu's back like sharp blades. Exactly how proud could this girl get? She was willing to risk the danger of traveling at night rather than yield to him. Feng Sun rubbed his hands together anxiously. "We have to stop them. They're all crippled, weak, injured, or sick, and they're going deep into the forest in the middle of the night. Has Feng Wu lost her mind?" Yan Yan was thrilled to see Feng Wu leave. She knew it. The crown prince didn't like Feng Wu at all. She mumbled in a feigned casual voice. "She left voluntarily. It's not like we chased her away. We're not to be blamed even if something happens to them." Feng Sun threw a dirty look at Yan Yan. His glare was bone-chillingly cold. Yan Yan felt as if her heart was being gripped by a giant hand and she was utterly flustered. Chapter 277, Feng Wu was out. "Just like that? Boss Jun. How about I go ahead and scout out the area in advance for you guys?" Feng Sun couldn't bring himself to see Feng Wu leave like that. Jun Linyuan recalled what he had heard under the lake. Feng Sun had asked Xuan Yi whether or not he should court Feng Wu. Had Feng Sun fallen in love with Feng Wu? What was there to like about that girl? She was so arrogant and irascible. Jun Linyuan gave Feng Sun an emotionless glance. "You're not going." Feng Sun scratched his head. "But they're such a weak bunch. Boss Jun, aren't you worried?" All eyes were on Jun Linyuan and the looks on Yan Yan's and Feng Lu's faces seemed especially expectant. Straight-faced and looking vexed, Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Sun, his gaze piercing and fierce. Gosh, what sort of lousy question was that? Feng Sun thought himself silly. "I'm expecting Boss Jun to have the same emotions as normal human beings, and that's just impossible. You wouldn't have forced them to leave if you were worried about them." "Forced them to leave?" Jun Linyuan was displeased. That arrogant girl left on her own. He forced no one. He went back to his own tent, looking very grumpy. Feng Sun and Xuan Yi exchanged looks and both sighed. They knew Boss Jun too well. Once the guy had made up his mind, he wouldn't change it for anything. Feng Sun and Xuan Yi went back to their tent, crestfallen, and sat there in silence. Meanwhile, Yan Yan and Feng Lu exchanged looks in excitement. "Feng Wu is out. Just like that? That was much easier than I thought." Feng Lu couldn't control the excitement in her voice. Yan Yan smirked. "She made it look as if she was so close to my cousin, and she fooled me. Ha, if that really was the case, could we have taken this tent so easily? The fact that we're in the tent now is proof enough that Feng Wu means nothing to them." Feng Lu's eyes were filled with hatred. "I hope they all get eaten up by magical beasts in the forest." It was deep into the night and all was quiet. Some were cultivating, some were sound asleep, and some were suffering from pain. Feng Lu was covered in bloody cuts and bruises after the whipping, and even the slightest move would make her suck in her breath in pain. Her temperature began to rise and she became delirious. Yen went to fetch Feng Yiran in a hurry. Feng Yiran wasn't in much better shape himself. His right hand had yet to recover from Feng Wu's poison and it was still numb and swollen. He was constantly drawing his breath in from the pain. Feng Lu has a fever. Feng Yiran looked annoyed. I'll go have a look. Meanwhile, Feng Wu was leading her family into the forest. Without saying anything, she had her own plan. The whole family was counting on her and she was anything but careless. Less than 50 kilometers into the forest, Feng Wu found a great spot to make camp. It was a smooth slope which faced away from the wind and was also unlikely to be attacked by magical beasts. The place was neither too far away nor too close to a river, which was convenient for fetching water and which wouldn't be affected if the water level rose. It was a place with plenty of water, lush grass, and fresh air, which cheered everyone up immediately. They had been traveling gingerly since they left the campsite and the atmosphere was rather tense. The beautiful lady eyed Feng Wu like a puppy dog, looking uneasy. Feng Wu had been cultivating with her eyes closed the whole time. She only jumped out of the carriage to help with setting up camp once they got there. Chapter 278, The Superb Miss Wu. Feng Wu sensed the strange atmosphere and asked in confusion, "Why are all of you so quiet?" Qiuling replied tentatively, "Miss, I thought you were upset." "Since when?" Feng Wu asked in resignation. "When we left just then, you were so." Feng Wu gave her a wry smile. "How cheerful could I be? They took our tent. But you have to admit, we're so much more relaxed now, after leaving the Crown Prince and his wingmen." "The Crown Prince and his wingmen?" Qiuling grimaced, then agreed. "That's right. The Crown Prince and his wingmen, well, especially His Royal Highness. Even the air feels denser when he's around. I had to walk on tiptoes. It indeed feels much more relaxing when they're not around anymore." The others chimed in after Qiuling said that, and even the lady nodded repeatedly while holding Feng Wu's hand. Feng Wu smacked her forehead. So, everyone agreed that Jun Linyuan was such an intimidating man. "Since all of us don't like to have them around, we'll travel on our own from now on." Feng Wu made the decision. "But," Qiuling asked gingerly, "will it be safe for us?" Feng Wu smiled. "I'm a level 8 spiritual master already and Uncle Qiu is almost recovered. I think the two of us are more than enough to keep everyone safe." "Level 8? Uncle Qiu looked at Feng Wu in disbelief. "Miss Wu, you've reached level 8 already?" Uncle Qiu was a level 7 spiritual master and he knew better than anyone else here that the more one advanced, the more difficult it was for them to make further progress. Take himself as an example. He had been stuck at level 7 for several years without making any progress at all. Feng Wu smiled. "Yes. I reached level 8 only hours ago. If I recall correctly." "Miss Wu, you only restarted your cultivation the day we set out, didn't you?" Uncle Qiu was so excited that the corner of his mouth trembled, as well as his voice. Feng Wu nodded casually. Uncle Qiu was speechless. So was Granny Zhao. And Qiuling. Their Miss Wu was incredible. Hahahaha, joy almost brought tears to Uncle Qiu's eyes. "I was worried about protecting this branch of the Feng clan from all those prying eyes after we get back to the Imperial capital, but I now see that my concerns are completely unnecessary. Our Miss Wu is a genius." Granny Zhao added happily, "No one will ever look down upon Miss Wu and this second branch of the Feng clan anymore." The beautiful lady had no idea why everyone else was so excited, but hearing their praise for Feng Wu, she smiled happily. It was already quite late and Feng Wu spared Granny Zhao from making a proper dinner. She boiled a pot of hot water and made 5 bowls of instant noodles instead. After the quick supper, everyone went back to their own tents. Feng Wu and Uncle Qiu were to keep watch. Knowing that the second shift was the harder one, Feng Wu told Uncle Chiu to take the first shift. Naturally, Uncle Chiu tried to refuse, but Feng Wu persuaded him with the simplest reason: she would cultivate while she kept watch and she needed absolute silence. Magical beasts still made all kinds of noises during the first shift and it would be impossible for her to cultivate properly. Uncle Chiu had no choice but to agree. In Jun Linyuan's tent, luminous pearls lit up the extravagant interior of the tent, making it as bright as daylight. The crown prince had his beautiful deep-set eyes closed as he sat there with a straight back and his legs crossed. He was cultivating. Chapter 279, The Restless Crown Prince. Usually, Jun Linyuan could enter the state of meditation as soon as he closed his eyes, but now that he had a big frown on his face. He was less than 15 minutes into his cultivation and little Feng Wu had popped into his head no less than 10 times. Jun Linyuan opened his eyes and looked very grim. For the first time in his life, Jun Linyuan realized that he couldn't clear his head of distracting thoughts. He would go to sleep, then. Climbing into his bed in frustration, Jun Linyuan pulled the duvet into his arms. However, as soon as he closed his eyes, little Feng Wu was there again, giving him a teasing wink. Jun Linyuan was astonished. Turning around in frustration, he tried lying on his other side. When he was finally getting a little sleepy, what happened earlier in the lake came back into his head like a slideshow. Jun Linyuan was amazed by how retentive his memory was. He remembered everything vividly, from when Feng Wu took off her undergarment to everything after that. The look in her eyes, her facial expressions, her movements, her voice. Blood rushed to Jun Linyuan's head. Thud! Jun Linyuan bolted up and punched the bed. Was this Feng Wu girl a witch or something? The bed was a makeshift one built from wood, and naturally, it couldn't withstand that punch. It crumbled with a crack. Feng Sun hadn't gone to bed yet and had been walking around Jun Linyuan's tent in circles. From Jun Linyuan's position, Feng Sun looked like a lonely wandering ghost. Hearing the noise, Feng Sun rushed into the tent immediately. Boss Jun! Boss Jun! However, what Feng Sun saw astonished him. Jun Linyuan sat there among broken pieces of wood with a duvet in his arms. The guy was too shocked to react. Feng Sun had never seen Jun Linyuan in such a sorry state before. This was Jun Linyuan, the all-powerful, resolute, and merciless crown prince who placed martial prowess above all else. However, the look on his face now reminded Feng Sun of a 5-year-old. Feng Sun wanted to suppress his laughter, but, ha, Feng Sun laughed until the muscles in his belly ached and tears rolled down his cheeks. Shut up! Jun Linyuan snapped. Unable to fight back his laughter, Feng Sun dashed out of the tent and guffawed. Jun Linyuan sat there in embarrassment. He would never have been discovered in this state if not for that girl. The vindictive young crown prince found another grudge to hold against Feng Wu. While Feng Sun was finally able to stop laughing, he had also caught the attention of everyone else. Yan was the first to react to his laughter. Rushing to his side, she asked, "What was that? What happened? Cousin, what's so funny? Tell me." Feng Sun ignored Yan's question and snorted at her. "Go back to bed. You're going back to your mother first thing in the morning. This is not the right place for you." Yan didn't reply, but she had already made up her mind. No matter what happened, she was going back to the Imperial capital with these people here. She had successfully chased Feng Wu away without breaking a sweat, hadn't she? Ha. Yan was so pleased with herself for that achievement. There, Xuan Yi pointed to the northeast and narrowed his eyes. They saw flames rising over there, lighting up the night sky. The look on Feng Sun's face changed. That's in the direction of the route back to the Imperial capital. Xuan Yi nodded. And little Feng Wu left in that direction. Xuan Yi nodded again. Without thinking, Feng Sun rushed into Jun Linyuan's tent and cried out, "Boss Jun! Help!" Jun Linyuan's face was as unruffled as an old well. He darted a haughty look at Feng Sun. It's little Feng Wu. Chapter 280, Setting Out. It's little Feng Wu. Feng Sun cried out, looking panic-stricken. The emotionless mask Jun Linyuan wore cracked and his eyes flickered, reminding one of 1,000 shattered stars. However, Feng Sun was too immersed in his own anxiety to notice the change in the crown prince's eyes. What about her? Jun Linyuan didn't let his face betray him. She's in trouble. Real trouble. Feng Sun pulled Jun Linyuan out of the tent and gestured to the northeast. Look! A fire has broken out over there. It must be little Feng Wu. Jun Linyuan gave Feng Sun a haughty look. And why should I care? Feng Sun almost jumped up. Boss Jun. I know you don't like her, but it's human lives we're talking about here. How can you be so cold? Forget it. I might as well count on Feng Wu getting her cultivation back first than wait for you to lend me a hand. Do whatever you want. I'm going to help little Feng Wu now. After that, Feng Sun dashed off, quicker than a streak of lightning. The crown prince was left behind on his own. Watching Feng Sun leave, Jun Linyuan stood there with an indecipherable look in his eyes. He then bit his lower lip, displeased. Since when was Feng Sun this impatient? Would it kill the guy to try harder to persuade his boss Jun? Gritting his teeth, the crown prince sulked. Yan ran out of her tent at that moment and was exasperated to see Feng Sun dashing off. What's my cousin doing in the middle of the night? Are we going to have to run around with him? Feng Lu was sleeping in the tent with a high fever. Feng Yiran was with her, dampening her forehead with cold towels. His stomach lurched when he heard Yan's words. Seriously? They had to go out in the middle of the night? And in such weather? When no one was looking, the stars had stopped twinkling in the sky. The silver moon was completely covered by thick clouds. The wind was gusty and it felt like little blades on their cheeks. A storm was coming. The proud crown prince's gaze was locked on that corner in the northeast. His eyes flickered and no one could tell what was going on in his mind. Xuan Yi had come to stand by Jun Linyuan's side. He said to Yan in an indifferent tone, Xiao Feng will be fine on his own. Plus, a storm is coming. As a neat freak, Jun Linyuan hated getting his shoes wet. The guy would never travel in such weather. Yan let out a breath of relief. So did Feng Lu and Feng Yiran, who had taken Feng Wu's tent. However, Jun Linyuan clenched his right fist at Xuan Yi's words. Feeling relieved, Yan still couldn't let the topic drop. She snorted. I have no idea what my cousin is thinking. Is he playing at saving a damsel in distress? Has he even considered the possibility that Feng Wu will take advantage of the situation and force him to marry her? Jun Linyuan went a little stiff. He darted a grim look at Yan. Yan shuddered. But this was such a rare opportunity and she had to make every effort to throw mud at Feng Wu, in spite of her chattering teeth. Well. It's possible. Feng Wu is so. Before Yan could say another word of complaint, Jun Linyuan said, We're setting out. What? Everyone was dumbfounded. Setting out? In the middle of a storm? Chapter 281, Wait for Me. However, the crown prince was already on horseback after that brief command. The next moment, he had dashed off. Xuan Yi was quick to react. He hopped nimbly onto his own palm-red horse to follow Jun Linyuan and urged the horse forward with Hahahaha. In an instant, both Jun Linyuan and Xuan Yi were out of sight as the others watched both guys disappear into the rain. Yan was stunned. Was it something she said? Why did the crown prince leave all of a sudden? All she said was that she didn't want Feng Wu to pester her cousin. Was that what the crown prince was worried about as well? Did he leave in a hurry to help her cousin? Yan had smuggled herself here just to get closer to Jun Linyuan and take advantage of the opportunity. she was more than happy to spice things up a little. However, there was no point staying here when Jun Linyuan wasn't around. Yan jumped onto a horse and dashed off as well. "Cousin, your Royal Highness, wait for me." Both Feng Yiran and Feng Lu were baffled in the tent. They exchanged looks of bewilderment. What should they do now? They might never be able to get this close to Jun Linyuan again. It had taken them some painstaking effort to remain in Jun Linyuan's vicinity, and it would be such a shame to let this opportunity go to waste. "Lu, do you think you can make it?" Feng Yiran asked. "Yes. Brother. We have to set out now." Feng Wu's whipping had given Feng Lu cuts and bruises all over her body. The wounds were infected and she had a high fever, which made her delirious. However, she had still been able to put together a plan. If she couldn't get the crown prince's attention under normal circumstances, she would try to arouse his pity with her fragile health. Meanwhile, in Feng Wu's camp, a forest riddled with magical beasts wouldn't be very quiet at night. During her shift, Feng Wu spotted a pack of flame cheetahs. As the name suggested, this type of cheetah was born with a fire attribute and its sole ability was to spit fire. Plus, they often did it as a group. Feng Wu had some repellent with her. Rising to her feet, she drew a safe circle around their tent with it. After that, she walked out of the circle and stared coldly at the cheetahs. There were 100 of them in total. Their eyes were fluorescent green in the dark, and as they looked back at Feng Wu, they opened their mouths, baring their sharp fangs. Feng Wu smiled a little. The timing was perfect. Feng Wu had been advancing so fast in her cultivation level that she didn't have any time to practice her combat skills accordingly. As a result, although she was a level 8 spiritual master already, her foundation was shaky and she didn't have the corresponding physical strength. Hence she was in dire need of an arduous battle to temper her body. Feng Wu had been keeping the fact she had resumed her cultivation from most people, making it very difficult for her to fight the opponents she needed. Luckily, they were in a forest of magical beasts now, and luckily, these 100 flame cheetahs had just landed on her doorstep. "Well, I guess I'll practice my flaming sword with you." Feng Wu raised flaming sword in her right hand and pointed it at the cheetahs. Last time, Feng Wu was able to make it to the 10th stance of her swordplay, piercing stars. Today, Feng Wu decided to finish all 12 stances. 11th stance. Stars rising out of the sea. Plop, plop. Leaping into the air, Feng Wu kicked off of a tree trunk with her toes. Then, she used the momentum to swoop down like a great hawk spreading its wings. Chapter 282, Stars in Heaven. Flames burst out from the tip of her flaming sword. And the flames leapt toward the sky. Under the moonlight, the sword looked resplendent. Sparks flew in all directions and all the flame cheetahs spat fire at Feng Wu. Instantly, flames sprang up, as if half of the sky was burning. That was what had caught Feng Sun's attention earlier. Feng Wu smiled. "Bring it on." As the cheetahs stood on their hind legs to leap at Feng Wu had already crouched down. Standing up, the cheetah's great stature put them at twice Feng Wu's height. Hence, when Feng Wu bent forward and flitted past them, they couldn't even touch her sleeves. Resourceful as always, Feng Wu stabbed at the cheetah's legs and abdomens as she made her way through the pack. Infuriated, the cheetahs went after Feng Wu. However, although they were great in number, they were too big to move as nimbly. Keeping her head down at the level of their legs, Feng Wu would stab them before switching spots right away. The cheetahs would never catch her like this. The flame cheetahs attacked the whole time, but all the flames they spat out only hit other cheetahs in the pack, which nearly caused a cannibalistic fight. Roar! Pissed, they kept chasing after Feng Wu. But Feng Wu was too light-footed for them to catch. She was swift, crafty and unpredictable. After running around for a while, 50 cheetahs fell to the ground, bleeding from their injuries. The other 50 cheetahs glared at Feng Wu with bloodshot eyes and they charged at her all at once. Roar! About time! Feng Wu was excited. For she had already mastered that 11th stance during the past few minutes or so. Stars rising out of the sea was complete, and she only had one stance left to master, stars in heaven. Stars in heaven. Flaming sword flew out of Feng Wu's hand and spun quickly in midair. Cheetahs in the blade's path dropped dead like harvested wheat. Blood splashed everywhere. Before they knew it, this place had turned into a living hell for them. Stars in heaven was a fierce stance that was perfect for destroying magical beasts in large numbers. In that brief moment, the spinning sword took the lives of 10 flame cheetahs. The cheetahs kept spitting fire, but stars in heaven didn't fear any flames. The last 40 flame cheetahs already looked shaken, but they stood their ground and decided to fight to the end. Feng Wu smiled. Great! She could get more practice. Stars in heaven. Go! Flaming sword flew out of Feng Wu's hand once more. Whoosh! It spun in midair. Popped up. The sword spun over the cheetahs' heads again and killed another 10 like a reaper. The remaining 30 cheetahs were covered in bloody cuts as well. Stars in heaven. Go! Feng Wu used that lethal stance again. Roar! The last 30 cheetahs were utterly shaken and they looked terrified. They forgot all about their dead companions and turned to flee. However, Flaming Sword wouldn't let that happen. As if it had a will of its own, the sword chased after the cheetahs and went on spinning. Until it killed all 100 flame cheetahs. After that, it flew back to Feng Wu with a crisp and proud clang. Feng Wu examined Flaming Sword and was pleasantly surprised. Chapter 283, She Won't Talk to Me. This sword was divine. Together with the sword stances, it was like giving a tiger wings. Thanks to Flaming Sword and the stances, Feng Wu finally had some combat skills she could count on, which would make her life back in the Imperial capital a little safer. Feng Wu was going to take care of the dead bodies when the sword flew out again and circled in the air over the dead cheetahs. The sword went over every single one of them, and by the time it came back to Feng Wu, the dead bodies had all turned to ash, which was then blown away by the wind. Without leaving a trace. Feng Wu was speechless. Only then did she realize that Flaming Sword had absorbed all the fire energy in the cheetahs, and without which, the bodies disintegrated. That was incredible. Feng Wu's mouth fell open as she stared at the scarlet-red sword in astonishment. Her beautiful master had given the sword to Feng Wu and she had no idea where it came from. She never gave it much thought before, but now, she had a feeling. This flaming sword was much more than it appeared. If only her beautiful master could wake up now. She had so many questions to ask. Feng Wu's mind wandered at the thought of her beautiful master, and she recalled the terms of her agreement with Little Phoenix. When she reached the spiritual grandmaster stage, Little Phoenix would tell her how to wake up her master. Feng Wu had thought that it would be ages before she became a spiritual grandmaster, but after her quick advancement in the last few days, she was much more hopeful. Would she get there before she knew it? After quickly cleaning herself in the river, she changed into some clean clothes and headed back toward the campsite. She then began to cultivate and lost track of time. Feng Sun's voice rang out. Little Feng Wu. Little Feng Wu. Are you alright? Where are you? He ran as fast as a streak of lightning and shouted at the top of his lungs. Seeing the light at the campsite, he sped up. Feng Wu opened her eyes. A storm had risen when she wasn't looking. Rain poured down from the thick clouds above, splashing muddy water everywhere. The rain also washed away what was left of the cheetah's ashes. Good. Feng Wu inwardly nodded in satisfaction. Through the curtain of rain, she saw a teenager dashing toward her like a shooting arrow. Feng Sun couldn't tell if it was sweat or rainwater that covered his face. He then saw Feng Wu standing gracefully in a shelter built from branches, with a peaceful look on her face. His heart skipped a beat and he rushed to her side, wanting to pull her into his arms. However, before he could do so, a slender yet strong hand grabbed him by his right shoulder and threw him in the other direction. Feng Wu looked up and met Jun Linyuan's piercing black eyes. She ignored the crown prince, who looked like a pissed-off lion. Rushing into the rain, she helped Feng Sun up with both hands and asked attentively, "Feng Sun, are you all right? Are you hurt anywhere?" To Feng Wu, Feng Sun might not be the most reliable guy in the world, but he did genuinely care about her. Hence, seeing him being tossed aside, her first reaction was to help him before she turned around to glare at Jun Linyuan, the culprit. Seeing Feng Wu's soft, fair hands on Feng Sun's arms, anger flickered in Jun Linyuan's eyes. However, Feng Sun had no idea of the fuse he had lit. He went on asking Feng Wu, "I saw a big fire in this direction just then and I thought something happened to you. Are you all right? Did anything happen?" Feng Wu would be lying if she said that she wasn't touched by Feng Sun's genuine concern. She smiled at him. "I'm standing here in one piece, aren't I?" Chapter 284, Sparks and Lightning. Looking at Feng Wu from head to toe, Feng Sun nodded. "You seem unscathed. But you really didn't see a big fire?" Since the rain had washed everything away, Feng Wu was able to give him an innocent and bewildered look. "What fire?" "Nothing." "Well, all the better." Feng Sun was relieved. He had been really worried. Feng Wu smiled at Feng Sun. "Were you running so fast because you saw the fire and thought that we were in danger here?" Feng Sun raised the chin. "What do you think?" Feng Wu grinned. Her smile reminded one of a dazzling summer day and it brightened up her already stunning face. Her beauty was irresistible. Jun Linyuan stood right beside them. Grabbing Feng Wu's fair hand, he stared at her. His face was livid. And he was giving off the most imperious and intimidating air. It was the prestige characteristic of someone who held a superior position. Feng Wu stared back at Jun Linyuan and she saw the anger in his eyes, but there was something else there that she couldn't put her finger on. He just kept his gaze on her as if he was going to bore a hole into her face. But he gritted his teeth and wouldn't utter a word. Feng Wu frowned. What was going on? "I gave up my tent willingly and left in advance. Has that somehow displeased your Royal Highness?" Jun Linyuan's eyes spat flames of anger. What had displeased him? Her giving up the tent and leaving early. What did she think? However, as the proudest teenager on the continent, Jun Linyuan could never bring himself to admit it. Hence, all he could do was glare at her in the most aggressive manner. Feng Wu couldn't stand it anymore. After humiliating and provoking her, he had moved on to interrogating her now. Even Jun Linyuan couldn't bully someone like this. Feng Wu threw off Jun Linyuan's hand angrily. "This is highly inappropriate. Your Royal Highness, you're way out of line." Jun Linyuan had used those words on Feng Wu before and she threw them right back at him. The color of Jun Linyuan's face changed, and in the dark, his eyes looked even more piercing. Poor Feng Sun. The quarreling pair was giving him a headache again. What was wrong with these two? Why did they have to fight whenever they met? Hence, Feng Sun rushed to their sides and tried to mitigate. "Gosh, what's wrong with the two of you? Why are you fighting all the time? Can't we just talk like normal people?" "You too. Shut up." Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan shouted in unison. It was meant for Feng Sun, but they were still glaring at each other as they spoke. The air between them seemed to be charged with electricity and one could almost see the sparks and streaks of lightning crackling between them. Feng Sun realized that Feng Wu reminded him a lot of Jun Linyuan when she was angry. The air she gave off was equally intimidating. Just then, the others arrived as well. Yan Yan was right behind Xuan Yi. Seeing how close Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan were standing to each other, Yan Yan was overwhelmed by jealousy. She yelled at Feng Wu, "You can forget your arrogance. His Royal Highness isn't here for you. Stop flattering yourself and wake up." Feng Wu frowned at Yan Yan. Why was everyone she disliked here? What was the point of leaving in advance? Yan Yan ran up to Feng Wu and smirked. "His Royal Highness is here for my cousin." Cousin Feng dashed off because he was worried about you, and His Royal Highness only came here because he didn't want you to pester my cousin. Feng Wu, you're not worth any attention. Chapter 285, So Pissed. Straight-faced, Jun Linyuan cast a stern glance at Yan Yan, looking very displeased. He didn't want her to pester Feng Sun. Hearing Yan Yan's words, Feng Wu felt blood rush into her cheeks. Staring coldly at Jun Linyuan, she pointed at Yan Yan and stressed each word through gritted teeth. Jun Linyuan, is she telling the truth? Jun Linyuan pursed his lips tightly. He stared at Feng Wu with a grim look on his face without uttering a word. Feng Wu had never felt this humiliated. Everyone mistakenly assumed she was in love with Jun Linyuan, and now, they were slandering her about pestering Feng Sun. How highly did these people think of themselves? It was an insult to the extreme. Fury filled Feng Wu's chest, so intense that she felt like she was on fire. Pointing at Jun Linyuan with a shaking finger, she said, "You, take your minions and get lost. Right now. Go away. Little Feng Wu." Feng Sun went up to her and tried to explain. However, he was intimidated by Feng Wu's bloodshot eyes. Taking a deep breath, Feng Wu pointed to the front. "Feng Sun, I don't want to get angry with you. Please just go." Yan Yan glowered at Feng Wu. "Mind your language. My cousin is a young lord and even the head of your Feng clan doesn't dare speak to him like that, let alone use those words with His Royal Highness. Feng Wu, who the hell do you think you are?" However, before Yan Yan could go on, smack. Feng Wu raised her right hand and slapped Yan Yan in her face. "That's for talking too much. Poor Yan Yan." She flew back at the strike and smashed into an ancient tree a short distance away, breaking a few branches. Xiao Wu, the beautiful lady, was woken up by the noise and she stepped out of the tent to see Feng Wu hitting Yan Yan, which frightened the lady. Holding Feng Wu's arm with her soft hands, she said, "Xiao Wu." Feng Wu only calmed down at her mother's consoling touch. Jun Linyuan glared at Feng Wu. He had come all the way here to help her out of kindness. Not only didn't she thank him, she told him to go away. Superior and proud as Jun Linyuan was, he had never been wronged like this before. He clenched his fists and blue veins popped out. Glaring at Feng Wu, Jun Linyuan looked like he was going to swallow her whole. His intimidating aura swept across the entire campsite and the temperature seemed to drop below freezing. "It's so cold," Feng Sun shuddered. Turning to the other side, he looked right into Jun Linyuan's murderous eyes and his stomach lurched. "Boss Jun, you." Jun Linyuan gave Feng Wu one last angry look before turning to leave. He soon realized that Feng Sun wasn't following him and he glared at the latter. "Get your ass over here." Jun Linyuan seemed to be in such a foul mood that everyone quivered inwardly and didn't dare make a sound. Growing up with Jun Linyuan, Feng Sun knew that the guy was genuinely pissed. He knew better than to defy the crown prince in such a situation. Hence, he scurried off after Jun Linyuan, while enjoining Feng Wu over his shoulder, "You guys should get going as soon as the rain stops. If the Gale ferry service up ahead gets shut down by the flood, you'll be stuck here for a month." Even at a moment like this, Feng Sun still cared about Feng Wu. Poor Feng Lu. The bumpy ride on the back of a horse almost made her pass out. After finally arriving at the campsite, she was told that Jun Linyuan had just left. Looking at Feng Lu's ghastly pale face, Feng Yuan frowned. "Can you keep up?"